A Pact with the Savage Alpha. The soil broke under my palms with a dry scratch, the kind of sound that meant the roots were as done as we were. I pulled the weeds and stacked them to dry out in the sun, thinking I might burn them later just to feel like I made fire out of something that wanted to choke us. The rows looked thin. The stalks looked tired. The fence sagged a little where the posts had leaned in a winter storm and never fully stood up straight again. Garrett came up from the goat pen carrying a length of rope. The frayed end was stained and sticky, and he kept his thumb pressed over it like he didn't want me to see and knew I would anyway. His boots left dull prints through dust that used to be good soil. "Another one," he muttered, looking toward the tree line instead of at me. Tether gone. Hoof prints and something else around the creek. Big and wrong. Mira straightened from the wash tub at the corner of the house. The wind lifted a damp shirt and slapped it against her shoulder. She didn't flinch. Her hands were red from lye. The skin split where she wouldn't complain about it. "Not tonight, again." "They don't count nights," Garrick said. "They count hunger." "We should reset the traps," I said. "Bring the old iron jaws out." "They're not foxes." He dropped the rope coil on the table by the door. It landed with a heavy thud, an ugly sound in a room that was supposed to keep us gentle. "They don't learn like foxes either. They take the trap and the hand that set it." "We can't keep losing animals." My voice came out flat. I kept pulling weeds so my hands had work. "We barely have enough milk for the little ones. If the frost comes and we haven't stored enough, we'll be boiling bark." Mira glanced at the sky as if it might answer back if she looked soft enough. "We pray," she whispered. I looked at the fence, at the sag, at the line of trees hunched close like a pack pressed together against a cold nobody else could feel. We'd been praying. The prayer felt like smoke that drifted in our faces and made our eyes water. I didn't say that. There are some truths you keep inside because speaking them out loud makes them heavier for everyone to carry. We ate early because it let us pretend we weren't stretching the bread by sleeping on it. The broth tasted like bones and onion water. The children took it like they took everything we handed them, with the kind of trust that breaks a person at the same time it puts them back together. Tamsin yawned until tears spilled and left clean tracks on her dusty cheeks. Finn stole a second heel of bread with a grin that used to be cheeky and was becoming sly. Milo fell asleep against my leg half through a story about a blackbird that had learned to talk. His head got heavier, and my ankle went numb, and I let it. Garrick took his bowl out to the porch and set a stool by the door. His knife lay across his knee, the blade nicked from too many uses that weren't what it was made for. "I'll keep watch," he said, as if it meant something against what came down from the woods when it wanted to. "If I hear anything, I'll wake you." "You won't hear them," Mira answered from the hearth. "They move like a promise you forgot you made." "Then they'll hear me," he said. He looked at me. "You'll sleep, Lenora." "I will." "You sleep too," he told Mira. "I'll pray," she said, which was as close as she could get. The children were breathing like warm bellows near the fire when the light started to die. I watched their bodies loosen into sleep, watched Finn twitch as if he were chasing something in a better field than ours. A soft ache lived under my sternum and had grown a little bigger. Every night the howls had rolled across the fields, and the pens had been emptier the next morning. Love does that. It builds a room in you and then sets a table and invites every fear to sit down and eat. Mira brushed soot off the hearth and stacked the spoons because she needed order somewhere. She glanced at the window every few breaths. The glass held the last smear of daylight like a bruise. "Do you remember when the creek froze solid?" she asked the room. "Not me." "Last winter." "Before that." She smiled at the memory and it hurt to look at it. "You fell through on the edge. Garrick hauled you out by your braid. You were furious he touched your hair." "I was 12. "You're still furiously you." She stepped closer and smoothed my sleeve crease with her thumb. "Don't try to stand between us and the world every time the world looks our way. You're small, and there's only one of you." "I'm big enough," I said, because I needed to believe it. Outside, the wind rose and fell and rose again, a long animal breath wandering across our field. It carried the tree smell and the damp creek smell and something metallic that made my tongue push against my teeth. When it faded, a long, low call threaded through the silence. It wasn't a wolf's voice. It was something that wore the memory of a wolf like a cloak and didn't bother to hide what else it was. Mira set a hand on the table to steady herself. "They're closer." "They're always close," Garrick called from the porch. "Close is their hobby." "Don't joke," Mira said, and I'm not. He tapped the knife hilt on the stool and the sound went out into the dark like a pebble tossed at a river. "I'm tired." "Get some rest," I called. "I'll rest when the goats rest without jumping at shadows." "You'll rest when you fall off that stool." "I've fallen off better things." Mira's mouth twitched, and for a heartbeat the room felt like our room again. Then the wind carried the metallic scent back through the window, and I felt the decision move inside me in a slow, steady way, the way frost crawls along a pane and leaves a shape that looks like a fern. It didn't feel like a plan. A plan is neat. This was a weight settling exactly where it was supposed to go. I cleaned the bowls and stacked them on the shelf. I spread a thin blanket over Milo and tucked it under his chin. I pulled a second over Tamsin because she kicked everything off in her sleep. Finn's foot was filthy. I wiped it with a damp rag because I couldn't leave it like that, not tonight. The rope coil still sat on the table where Garrick had dropped it. The frayed end had darkened. I stood over it for a moment and felt my jaw clench. I loved my family, and I hated that rope. And somehow those two feelings fed each other until they were one thing. I took the scrap of brown paper that had wrapped soap months ago, and a small piece of charcoal from the hearth. The words came easy. "I'm going to ask them to stop. I'll offer me. Don't follow." I didn't write their names or mine. Names make things heavier. I left the scrap under the coil and tied my boots tight. I shrugged on my cloak and pulled the hood up. The cloth smelled like smoke and the inside of our house, and I hugged it around me for one heartbeat longer than I needed to. I eased the door open and stepped onto the porch. Garrick didn't turn, but I saw his head tilt like a wolf catching a change in the air. "Where are you going?" "Nowhere far. There's only one place to go in the dark." "Then I'll be back sooner." "You're not as quiet as you think," he murmured. "You never were." "I'm trying." "You try at everything." He kept his eyes on the tree line. "Don't go where the ground forgets your name." "I won't." "You will," he said, but there wasn't anger in it. "If you keep walking straight, you will." "I'll remember it for both of us." He breathed out. The knife gleamed once and went dim. "If you meet a thing that wants a price, remember it will never ask for what you expect." "I know what I'm offering." "Do you?" "Yes." "If you don't come back, I'll break my back learning to be two people." He rubbed a hand across his face. "But I'd rather not." "I will come back." "Come back different then," he said. "But come back." I stepped off the porch, and the yard changed. It stopped being ours. The fence didn't look like a boundary anymore. It looked like a line a child drew and forgot. The goat pen smelled tired. The stump where Garrick sharpened his blades held a dark crescent from the last time he'd let the knife bite too deep. I moved past all of it without touching it with my eyes too long, because looking can turn into staying. The field met the ditch and the ditch met the creek. The creek whispering over stones sounded like a voice trying not to wake a sleeping farm. Mist sat low over the water like it had made a bed and wasn't ready to leave it. I balanced across on the fallen log we always used. The bark had worn smooth where our boots had worried it. Halfway over, I looked down and saw the prints pressed in the damp mud. Too large for a wolf, too long in the toes, weight set in a way that belonged to something that had learned to stand like a man and liked it. I stepped onto the far bank and the air changed. The trees grew tight, their branches netted together, their shadows layered. Pine and wet bark and that metallic tang shifted and settled around me. The night thickened. The sounds changed too. No soft scurry, no friendly rustle. Things breathed, and then chose not to. The forest held itself like a patient lung. I moved slow because moving fast in a place that isn't yours is a way to trip on the first thing that wants you to be smaller. I skirted brambles and stepped over roots fat as fists. Every now and then the breeze found its way under my hood and stroked the hair at my nape and told it to stand up. I didn't call out. Announcing yourself to a thing that already knows you're there is a good way to learn how loud you can scream and how little it helps. Light leaked through in scraps. The moon got caught on a bough and shook. I could hear water farther in where the creek hairpinned and widened. The ground rose under my feet and fell again so gently it made me sway. A barn owl turned its head and watched me. I thought about the stories we'd heard since we were small, the ones we told each other to make the fear feel like a blanket instead of a blade. The savage clan, the beasts in the woods, men who wore scars like jewelry and carried nothing but teeth, wives who swore they saw eyes watching from the far field but never found prints because the thing that stood there wore your imagination like boots. We had a name, we said, when we wanted to sound like we understood. Ronan Veynar. Some said it like an insult they wished they could afford. Some said it like a prayer they didn't mean to say out loud. A branch snapped to my right, not the dry little pop of a twig under a fox, a clean break, like a hand saying hello and making sure you heard it. I stopped and lifted my chin and listened to the silence that came after. The silence answered back. I felt my own pulse in my ears and lined my breath up with it on purpose. I came to offer a trade, I said. The dark held the words without echo. Nothing metal bit the air. Nothing laughed. The trees breathed. Farther in, something dropped into the creek and climbed out. For peace, I added, for the fields and the pens and the children who wake hungry. A current moved through the brush that had nothing to do with wind. I couldn't see what made it, but the leaves leaned toward me, and then away like they were listening and embarrassed to be caught doing it. I took another step, and a thorn caught my cloak. I stopped to free it and left a little thread behind. The forest could keep it. I held my hood back so my face was uncovered. I know you hear me. A laugh found me, faint and low, like a growl cut short, because the thing that made it didn't want to share the exact shape of its teeth just yet. I turned toward it and saw nothing. The dark sat down again and crossed its legs. I kept walking. The ground sloped and the trees thinned just enough that I could see the pale suggestion of a clearing to the left. The air there felt warmer. Fire leaves a memory in the air long after it goes to sleep. I felt that memory on my skin. I eased toward it, placing my feet the way I placed jars on the shelf, when the glass had a crack I didn't want to admit was there. At the edge of the clearing, I stopped. If I stepped forward, I would have to keep stepping. The line was silly, just a shift in the dark, a widening of space, a circle stamped by feet I couldn't see. It felt like the mouth of something, patient and open, waiting to taste whatever walked over the teeth. I thought of Tamsin's knees, always skinned from climbing what she wasn't supposed to climb. I thought of Finn hiding a stolen heel of bread under his shirt and sharing it with Milo in secret, both of them thinking I didn't notice. I thought of Mira's hand smoothing a crease that never comes out, and Garrick pretending his knife could cut hunger in half if he sharpened it enough. I thought of the goat pen and the coil of rope, and the way a life can be yanked by things that never have to see your face. I offer me, I said into the clearing. Me for peace, me for meat on the table, me for their sleep. The trees swallowed the words and held them for a count that felt like a dare. A colder wind slid through and took the back of my neck with it. I waited. I waited long enough that my knees thought about trembling, and then decided not to, because I hadn't given them permission. I took one step into the clearing and held my ground. I kept my chin up because Mira always told me to, and because the night will kneel you without your consent if you give it too much to work with. I felt eyes. I felt them in the way the small hairs along my forearms lifted, in the way the tight skin over my ribs tried to teach my lungs to be smaller. I couldn't see them. Not seeing didn't change knowing. Behind me, far away and at home, a stool creaked in the quiet, and a knife clicked against wood. I pictured Garrick rubbing his brow with his thumb and squinting toward a tree line he couldn't watch and have it look back. I pictured Mira picking up the rope coil and finding the scrap of paper half tucked under it. She'd stand very still, and then sit down, and fold her hands and look at the prayer as if it might come running if she glared hard enough. The thought steadied me, the way a hand on your spine steadies you before you step up into a wagon that might jolt you. I know who to ask for, I said, Ronan Veynar. The name landed in the clearing and spread. It sank into the packed earth where countless feet had trod and came back up like heat. The wind missed a beat. The night cocked its head. Somewhere to my left, something that had been crouching stood up and then chose not to walk yet. I didn't take another step. The next one belonged to them. The music of the creek threaded through the trees and tugged at the corner of my mind. The air smelled like smoke that had once been fire, and would be again if someone decided to feed it. I lifted my chin one more breath so my throat was exposed and my eyes were level. I didn't close them. I didn't want to give them the gift of not having to meet what they made. I stood and let the forest decide whether I was worth the trouble of answering. The clearing held its breath. I stood at the edge with the trees against my back and dirt packed hard under my boots. Warmth clung to the air, the kind that lingers where fire has lived often. I didn't move. I let them come. Figures stepped out of the brush one by one until shadows wore faces, furs and leather, skin nicked by claw and tooth, braids threaded with bone and wire. They curved into a half ring without hurry, leaving room at the center like a mouth-saving space for the bite. The field sent a gift. Small gift. Brave eyes. Smells like bread and fear. I kept my hands loose and my chin up. I came to trade. For what? For peace. A woman leaned on a fur, braids heavy down her back, a scar pulling one corner of her mouth a fraction higher than the other. You walked in alone. Yes. No ribbon left on a branch so your father can find your body without guessing. He won't follow. He will, a tall boy muttered. They always do. They bring pitchforks that look like faith. I left a note. The scarred woman studied my face. Brave little farmer. Stupid little farmer. Both wear the same boots. I asked for your Alpha. Murmurs folded over each other and went quiet fast. Heads tipped the way cattle tip when thunder breathes. You know his name, the broad woman near the fire pit said. Ronan Veynar. The name moved through them like a stone passed palm to palm. The tall boy's grin died. Someone breathed out and cut the sound short. You brought him into your mouth, a man said. Now he'll want to see if it fits. I offer myself, I said, a me for peace. The ring stilled. A pine needle dropped and reached the ground with a sound I should not have been able to hear. A laugh tripped and was swallowed. The scarred woman flicked dirt with the toe of her boot, drawing a lazy line between us. You belong, she tested. I do. To who? To your Alpha. Until he decides I'm nothing he wants. You think he stops wanting? The broad woman's mouth folded into something like a smile. Sweet that. A weight rolled through the trees, not sound yet, not sight, just the feeling of something large altering the size of the night by the fact of existing. The clan didn't turn to look. They adjusted their feet the way a flock resets its balance when wind changes. Boot on soil. Another. He came through the gap between furs as if the space had been cut to his height. Hair dark and rough. Shoulders that made the clearing feel smaller. An old scar slashed from neck to shoulder like a blade had written on him and the writing refused to fade. No weapon in his hands. The clearing carried enough for him. Gold sat in his eyes the way heat sits in coals. Banked. Ready. He stopped a few paces from me and looked, not up and down like a buyer choosing fruit, forward, through. The way a hunter decides if the thing in front of him will run well enough to make the chase worth its breath. I lifted my chin. He set a palm under my jaw and tilted my face an inch higher. Heat from his skin, roughness from work, steadiness that didn't ask for permission. He breathed close to my throat, and that metallic note in the air sharpened until it made my tongue press against my teeth. You walked in. I did. No rope at your back, no rope. No one to drag your feet when they decide they want to live. They already decided. They always run. I won't. He watched my mouth, then my eyes, reading for places a lie might try to hide. His hand dropped. He eased around me once, unhurried, measuring how I held my ground when heat passed close. You said belong. Yes? To me? To you. For peace. For my family. For the fields. For sleep. The scarred woman's voice drifted from my right, dry as bark. Hold that head up. I kept it up. He stopped in front of me again. The gold narrowed a fraction. You know what belong means here. I know what I'm offering. Stories told you something, stories are polite. Then use other words. Obey. Yes. Open. The breath snagged under my ribs and I let it go through my nose. Yes. Give when I take. Yeah. Do not run. I won't. He touched the notch at my throat with his thumb and felt the jump of my pulse. Afraid. Yes, you choose anyway. Yes. Good. Fear that chooses can work. A murmur rippled along the ring and stilled. The fire pit at the center breathed and remembered heat. He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, not careful, not rough, just making sure my face stayed open to him. You smell like field work and the kind of stubborn that leans into a door when the latch breaks. I hold what is mine. Not anymore. It will be yours, I said. If you agree. A breath tugged at the corner of his mouth, not a smile, recognition. He glanced once at the scarred woman. She lifted one brow, amused and approving, and let it fall. You walk in offering yourself because your father wouldn't. My father would, I wouldn't let him. Why? He's tired. We're all tired. His tired breaks. Mine can be used. A short, quiet laugh worked its way out of the scarred woman and disappeared into the trees. He didn't look away from me. You bring nothing. I left a note. For the old ones. For the ones I love. You think a note makes them stay? They'll stay because I told them, and because if they come, you'll have to teach a lesson I'm not asking for. What lesson are you asking for? That a trade can be clean, I said. Take from the one who offers instead of taking in the dark. We are the dark. Then do it in light. Gold sharpened. You like lines. I like terms. Say them. You leave our fields and animals, you leave our door, you don't punish my neighbors for my convenience. You think I raid for sport? I think hunger becomes habit. He angled his head. The scar along his shoulder deepened in the moving fire glow. And your terms for you? I come when you call. I sleep where you put me. I open when you want me open. I work. I don't lie. I don't run. You don't bargain later with tears, so I don't bargain. You keep Duskbane. I keep Lenora. You understand there's no softness here. I didn't come for soft. A low sound went around the ring, approval and appetite mixed. The broad woman's mouth flattened and then eased. The tall boy's shoulders bunched like he wanted to see what truth looked like when it stopped pretending to be pretty. He lifted his chin toward the dark just beyond the ring. Men moved without him needing to point. Coals split. Flame took and rose. Sparks climbed. Heat rolled across my shins and made the scars on his shoulder glow like old writing. The scarred woman drifted nearer than before, weight easy, eyes bright. Last chance to run. I used last chances up. Good, you look better without them. He focused on me again. Say belong. I belong. To who? To you. Say it clean. I belong to you. The words left my mouth and settled in bones that felt like they had been waiting for the weight. He watched them fit. You want peace, he said, voice low enough that the fire seemed to lean closer. I want obedience. I will hear no weeping about the math later. No weeping. You will cry? He added, not unkind. But not about the math. I held his gaze. The clearing pulled itself tighter around us because he wanted it to. Accept means seal, he went on. We don't sign with ink. Then seal. The tall boy breathed out like a pup straining at a leash. The broad woman flicked a glance that kept him where he was. The ring flexed inward a fraction, a careful closing mouth. He looked past me at the trees and spoke a word I did not know. It felt like a command the forest had been waiting to answer. The fire climbed higher. Faces took on plains and hollows. The night stepped back to give us room. He came closer by the distance of a breath. Heat reached me. He set one hand on my shoulder and the other low at my back and placed me exactly where he wanted me. The ground steadied under my boots because I decided not to sway. Look at me. I looked. You ask for clean, he said. Clean means now. Here. Before mine. Under my sky. I want an end, I said, not a whisper. You ask for end, I begin. I nodded once. You will stand when I set you. Kneel when I tell you. Open when I press. Wear my mark. Answer when I call your name. And you will learn to like the way I own it. I will. Give me your name. Lenora. He tasted it with his eyes. You keep it. I use it. The scarred woman's voice slid under the crackle of flame. Strong shape, that name. I was built for it. Ronan's attention did not drift. Your house will sleep with meat in it. Yes. Your field will grow unbothered. Yes. Your father will stop sitting up with a knife he knows won't help. Yes. You will stop pretending hunger doesn't bite as hard when you don't look at it. Yes? He tilted his head, curious for a beat. You argue well. You don't beg. You know the price and you set your mouth around it. I came to be useful. Usable, he corrected. Usable, I echoed, and felt something inside me accept the word and turn to face the work. The ring eased a little as if the clearing itself had unclenched. Even the tall boy's weight settled. The broad woman folded her arms and watched with the heavy patience of someone who has seen this shape before and still respects the way it draws itself. You will not expect gentle, he said. I will not. You will not pretend you want gentle later because it is easier to ask for than what you want. I won't pretend you want to be owned. I want them safe, I said. If that requires me owned, then I want what requires it. His eyes warmed by a degree that wasn't softness, only heat recognizing its own work. Good. He looked past me to the ring. Listen, he told them, low and bright. This is the shape of a bargain. This is how it is taken. This is how it holds. The clan answered with a rumble that lived in chests and moved into the trees like a sound the branches recognized. The fire lifted. The night pulled back to watch better. The earth beneath my boots felt like it remembered other feet, other bargains, and had decided not to judge the new ones. He leaned in until the edge of his breath touched my mouth. Choose again. Yes. His thumb pressed once at the pulse in my throat, a claim written in touch before any other writing. He stepped back half a pace. Not retreat. Arrangement. The ring moved to fit his choice. The scarred woman's shoulder brushed mine and then slid away, so I stood clean at the center. The tall boy couldn't contain himself. Ask if she's untouched. The broad woman's hand snapped out and caught his wrist without looking. Mind your hunger. Ronan did not turn. His focus stayed where it was. The gold in his eyes deepened and edged. I already know what I know. I kept my eyes on his. I didn't let my mouth try to shape a defense into the air. The work now was standing, and I did it. He raised his hand with the smallest motion. The rumble quieted. Heat rolled off the pit. Flame swayed in a slow lean that showed me the old scar again, and made it look like the story of a cut that had taught a long lesson. "You asked in the open," he said. "You will be taken in the open." "I came to end it," I answered, "then end your past." "I'm ready." "You're not," he said, blunt and honest. "But you choose anyway, and that is better than readiness." I nodded, and he glanced once at the scarred woman. "Teach her where to stand." She stepped in front of me and tapped a place on the packed dirt. "Here, so everyone sees, so you remember later where your feet first learned the new language." I moved to the mark and planted my boots. She looked me over, not unkindly. "Breathe," she murmured. "He likes eyes, give him yours, keep them until he tells you not to." "I will. Last lesson," she added, a smile tilting wrong with the scar and still managing to be beautiful. "When it burns, do not make the fire the villain. You called it." "I called it." She stepped out of the space and the night filled it with heat. Ronan closed what distance remained. Nothing hurried, nothing wasted. The ring leaned and held. The forest listened to its own law being spoken out loud. "Watch me," he said. I watched. He took my face in his hands, not gentle, not cruel, steady, like a man who enjoys the weight of a tool that fits his palm. The world narrowed to gold and heat and the shape of a promise that didn't need blessing. My heart struck hard and then evened itself, as if it had found the pace it could keep for whatever was coming. He breathed in once, long and deep, and the clearing breathed with him. Then his mouth found mine, not sweet, not questioning. A first sentence written without ink, and the night around us answered with a low, hungry sound that made the flames lift higher in the pit. The first press of his mouth took the air out of me and put something hotter in its place. Heat rose up from my chest to meet his, a rush that made the clearing tilt and then steady. He didn't ask. He took. The kiss wasn't careful and it wasn't cruel. It was a sentence written without ink. The kind of truth bodies learn before the mind decides how it feels about being told. He broke it and kept my face in his hands, thumbs along my jaw, the gold in his eyes holding mine where he wanted them. "Choose. Yes? Who? You. Why? For peace. For my family. For mine. For yours." He let his hands fall and turned his head just enough for the ring to hear. "Witness." A low ripple moved through chests and into branches, not a cheer, a weather change. The scarred woman slid closer, weight easy, eyes bright, as if the night had finally remembered what it came for. His palm landed on my shoulder, not a caress, a placement. "Kneel." My knees met, packed earth smooth from other knees. Heat breathed from the pit. The night pressed in to listen. He moved behind me, stripped my cloak, gathered my hair, and lifted it to bear the slope from neck to shoulder. "Open your throat." I raised my chin. The ring shifted. The tall boy drew breath and swallowed it when the broad woman's glance cut him off. "Last chance for no," the scarred woman murmured near my left ear, almost kind. My lesson, not his. "Yes." His mouth found my ear. "Untouched when you walked in." "Yes." "Not anymore." His hand settled flat at my sternum and pressed until my spine understood what shape to hold. His other hand covered the thin skin over the shoulder bone. Teeth rested there, not yet pressing, the promise of pressure making heat pool low and bright. "Look at me." He stepped where my eyes could hold his without breaking posture. I found the gold and locked on. "Keep them." I kept them. His mouth fell the last inch and his teeth sank into me. Pain flared sharp and clean. The ring gave one layered sound that made the fire leap. The bond hit like lightning, choosing a pine and making it true. Heat ran the length of me and folded back, a flood turning edges round. My body arched into his hand. A sound broke out of me and lived in his mouth for a breath. "Good." His voice dropped into the new hollow and fit there. "Take it." I let the pain widen and the heat follow. It rolled through my chest into my arms until my fingers tingled. The world narrowed to 3 points: the bite, the weight of his palm, and the gold holding my gaze steady while everything else blurred. Something old lifted its head and faced him. It didn't speak words. It knew direction. He withdrew slow. Sting bled into pulse. Cool air found the wet and turned it to flame again. My hands shook. He took my chin between thumb and forefinger and brought my eyes back when they wanted to close. Mine. Yes. The ring breathed as one, a low agreement that felt like a roof. The scarred woman's wrong-angled mouth bent into a smile that was somehow right. Breathe, little farmer. Air went in. The creek's song threaded the dark again. My knees were numb and my chest too full. His hand slid from my sternum to my ribs and held me steady while the rush found its rhythm. What do you feel? Heat, pain, you. Good. It's loud. It will get louder. I can take it. You will. His fingers brushed the mark. Fire shot down my spine and burst behind my ribs. A noise moved at the back of my mind, not a word, a shape of sound heavy as a drum. Mine. I flinched and stilled. You hear it? Yes. You'll hear it again. Is it you? It is the part that doesn't pretend. The tall boy shifted. She took it clean. She asked for it clean. The broad woman answered, not unkind. Pretty breaks bones. He lifted me by the elbows and set me on my feet like he was moving the ground, and I went with it. The world tilted and leveled. He kept me upright with a hand until my knees remembered themselves. When I held without sway, he looked beyond me to the ring. Peace for Duskbane land, he said, steady carrying. Field, pen door, any who touch it bleed for me. The rumble that answered pushed into my ribs and settled there. The scarred woman counted faces with her eyes, measuring who understood and who would need reminding. The broad woman nodded once like a debt had been paid, in the exact coins she liked best. My fingers were still tight at his forearms. I loosened them because I wanted holding to be mine to choose. He watched that choice, and the left corner of his mouth tipped a breath without softening. Look at me. I did. Say it again. Not for me. For you. I belong to you. He drank it in like water after dust. His thumb skimmed the hot edge of the bite and the world burned white for a blink. Now I take what I accepted. He turned me with a hand at my hip and walked me toward the low shelter of hides and branches. The ring edged back, making a lane. Fire heat followed. Night leaned close. At the opening he bent and brought his mouth to my ear. Eyes where I put them. On you. On me. The shelter smelled of smoke and fur and a deeper musk that didn't have a farm name. Pelts layered the floor. The hide doorway breathed with the updraft from the pit. He filled the space and made it smaller without making it small. His hand took my chin and set my gaze back on his. Open when I press. Yes. Use your words. Yes. Good. He lifted my hands, set them at his shoulders. The scar under my left palm lifted like a raised line in bark. He watched my eyes while he moved, slow enough for the slowness to be its own control. His mouth found mine again, harder, and the world narrowed to heat and weight, and the lesson I had come to learn. He didn't hunt sweetness. He hunted the yes he had demanded, and I gave it. Say it. Yes. He pulled the word out of me with his teeth at my lower lip. The sounds that climbed my throat found space between us, and he let them live. Something in me that had braced for years set its back against a new wall and stopped bracing. Outside, the pack's low attention held. The scarred woman's quiet laugh drifted and faded. The fire cracked and drew breath. Don't look away. I won't. He eased me onto the furs with the inevitability of weather. His hand returned to my ribs and pressed me into ground that knew how to carry weight. The bite hummed with my pulse. The bond moved through me in time with his mouth and the press of his hands. Now, open. I opened. Pain came and went. Small, then bright, then round as heat swallowed the edges. He watched my face and took what he named. When a sharp line crossed me, his mouth caught the sound and shaped it into something I could ride. He was not gentle. He was exact. He was the shape of the bargain I had asked to become. Words. Yes. More. Yes, Ronan. Good. He used the name and returned it and took it back until it felt like a tool we were building together. The drumbeat in my bones answered, steady and simple, mine spoken from both sides. He put his mouth to the mark and the noise punched out of me without thought. He didn't ease. He deepened. Heat and pain braided into one rope. I gripped his shoulders like a woman who has decided to want and is done apologizing. The choice to hold was mine, and he let it be mine. Outside, the pack hum thickened. The broad woman's approval rumbled. The tall boy's laugh sparked and died when an elbow found his ribs. The scarred woman's low sound carried victory with it, the math of power adding up to a number that pleased her. Look at me. I did. I didn't blink. You will not ask for soft. I won't. You will not hide when you want. I won't. You will not forget why you walked in. For peace. For mine. He took me past sharpness into a deep ache that lived under my ribs and pulled at my spine. He stayed there with me. Relentless as weather. Certain as gravity. When the moment broke, it came slow. And then hard. And then slow again. And he made me watch him while it took me. The sound that left me wasn't the careful noise of a girl from a thin house. It was old. It had teeth. The yes that followed filled the small space and pressed into his mouth and didn't worry about being pretty. Good. He held and rode the last of it with me. When it eased, he kissed me again. Not softer, slower. The kind of slow that doesn't need to hurry because the road is chosen. The fire outside settled. The hum thinned. Satisfied law drifting back into animals. Mine. Yes. He lifted on his knees and studied the bite. Blood welled clean. His tongue touched it once, and the bond flashed white, the drum in my bones answering itself. He gathered me with one arm and stood carrying me as if the earth liked to help him. My legs forgot, then remembered. He let them forget for a few steps, and then set me down, steadying me by the waist. He pushed the hide aside and drew me into the clearing. The pack quieted the way a field goes still before rain. Firelight painted us. Smoke slid over the mark and made it sing. The night watched and admitted it had nothing better to do. He lifted his chin. Spines straightened. Feet found their places. He didn't raise his voice. It is sealed. The layered howl that rose wasn't performance. It was a roof made of throats. It reached the trees and came back. It spilled down the creek, and the water braided it and carried it toward fields that would, for a while, sleep unbothered. It pushed into my ribs until the mark burned so bright, the edges of the world freckled. I swayed. His hand at my waist held me like falling was a shape the night didn't have unless he allowed it. The scarred woman lifted 2 fingers, offered a thin gesture that read like a blessing in a place that didn't use the word. The broad woman's chin dipped once. The tall boy twisted his grin into something that fit his face better. Say peace, Ronan murmured for me alone. Peace. Say mine. Mine, I answered, and felt with a start that the word didn't belong only to him. It belonged to the part of me that had lifted its head when his teeth broke skin dot. He nodded, approval landing like a warm hand on a wild neck. He turned to the ring. Eat. Guard the lines. Duskbane sleeps under me. Movement broke the circle. Some went to the fire, some to the trees, some melted back into dark patrol. Sparks rose and died. Smoke curled and thinned. Home unrolled inside me like a picture. Garrick loose on the porch stool at last, knife in his lap, sleep pinning his stubbornness for a few hours. Mira in gray morning light lifting the rope and finding the scrap under it. Palm, flat over the words. eyes closed on a thank you she didn't know how to shape. Tamsin and Finn and Milo tangled and not waking hungry. The picture slid in beside the bite and fit. His hand tightened at my waist and the picture settled deeper. Come. You stand until I let you fall. Let me fall where? On me. We passed the scarred woman. She touched the edge of her mouth with 2 fingers, a sign that felt like kin in a place where I didn't have any. The broad woman watched and approved without comment. The tall boy burned to speak and learned not to. At the shelter, he looked again at my throat. His thumb brushed the mark and heat jumped into my eyes. Look at me. I looked. Tomorrow you'll hear the forest louder, you'll hear me in it. You'll want and hate wanting and choose again. I will. Good. He drew me inside. The hide dropped. Fire turned to glow. The small space held breath and heat and the steady weight of his hand over the mark like a palm against a door holding back weather. Outside, the pack sent one last layered howl into the trees. The branches caught it, kept it a heartbeat, and let it go. The sound threaded through me and tangled with the bite and the fire and the yes until I couldn't tell them apart. The world tilted. My body remembered being small enough to be lifted, remembered trusting hands because there was nothing else to do. I let that memory stand beside the new one of choosing. Welcome to the savage, he breathed close enough that the words warmed the mark. Now, sleep. The bite throbbed once hard. The bond answered. The clearing dimmed. The pelt of night pulled over me. I fell into it with his hand warm at my throat and the roof of the pack's voices still humming in my bones, and the last clear thought that held before sleep took me was simple and iron. I had walked here, I had not run. Morning seeped through the hide in a thin gray line, slow as a breath. I woke to the soft pop of coals, the low clink of metal, and the quiet murmur of wolves pretending to be people because the sun was up. For a moment I didn't know the shape of the space around me, and then the heat at my shoulder reminded me with a slow pulse that matched my heart. The bite throbbed, warm and sure. Memory rose with it. The firelit circle, the ring of faces, the weight of his hands, the way the night had narrowed, and then opened. I lay still and listened. The camp moved in a rhythm I didn't know yet. Footsteps on packed dirt. The rasp of a blade on stone. Water shifting in a pot. A woman laughing, the sound low and edged. Every small noise arrived naked and stayed that way. The hide wall breathed with the air outside. Smoke, pine, wet bark, and the faint copper note that made my tongue touch my teeth. All of it came through and settled under my skin as if I'd always known it. A voice slid past the door, amused and sharp. She's awake, I can smell it. Smells like fear. A man chuckled. And bread. He's feeding her. Better fed than faint. Another voice, level and practical. She walked in last night. She'll walk out here too. Or crawl. She won't, the first woman said. I've watched spines. Hers knows its business. A bowl bumped the earth just outside the hide. The seam darkened with a shape. Eat, little farmer, or he'll do it for you. I hear you, I answered. We all do now. Footsteps moved away. I pushed up, ribs stiff, legs heavy from strange rest. My hair was a snarl at the nape where a large hand had gathered it. The bite burned with clean heat under my palm, not angry, not kind, only certain. I lifted the hide and pulled the bowl inside. Thin stew, strips of meat, a heel of bread gone tough at the edges. Steam fogged the air. The smell reached the simple, practical place under my ribs that had nothing to do with wolves or vows. I ate fast, then forced myself to slow because fast makes you shake and you can't shake around wolves. A sound crossed my bones that didn't come through my ears. Not words exactly. A weight. A call. Mine. It rolled through the marrow and found the bite and pushed there like a thumb checking a bruise. I flinched and set my palm over it. Heat answered heat. The world steadied. The seam darkened again. Stand. The single word laid itself across my skin like a bar laid across a door. I stood without thinking. He filled the entrance as if the door had learned his width. Hair dark and rough, jaw square, the old scar cut from neck to shoulder, gold, set low and steady in his eyes. The light behind him looked thin compared to the weight he carried into the small space. "Walk to me." I walked. He took the empty bowl from my hands, set it aside, and let his fingers graze my knuckles. The brush was not soft, not rough, only deliberate. Heat jumped under my skin and ran along a path straight to the bite. "Look at me." I did. In morning light, the gold looked heavier, like coals banked and ready. He measured me without hurry, took in hair, shoulders, face, the useless attempt my body made to hold still under his attention. "You slept." "Some." "You ate." "Yes." "You stand." "I do." "Good." He set his palm over the mark and pressed. Not hard, just enough to remind my knees they had work. They wanted to forget. I made them remember. He watched that choice and accepted it with a small breath that didn't move his mouth. "You remember the terms?" "Yes." "Speak them." "You leave my family and our land alone. You take from me. I come when you call. I don't run. And I obey. And I open." He watched my mouth while I formed the last word. Something satisfied moved under the gold and vanished. 2 fingers tapped the bite once. Heat answered. "You will learn the rest." "More than this?" "There is what I will take," he said. "And what you will learn to want taken." A flush rose high under my collarbone. I held his gaze because I refused to look at the ground in this place. I refused to look small when my choice had been big. "You hear me?" he asked, not with his voice, with the weight in the words. "I do. In there. I hear you." "Good." Voices gathered outside, a low buzz thickening near the door. The scrape of feet. A laugh that wanted to turn into a howl and didn't yet. He didn't glance toward it. His jaw tipped the smallest degree, as if the camp's attention were a draft under a door he had long ago learned to ignore. "They want to see if you break." "I know." "They want to see if I bend." "Do you?" "No." He lifted the hide and light walked in. The encampment spread rough and ordered in a way that had nothing to do with neatness. Shelters tucked under boughs, fire pits smoking, racks hung with meat where the smoke found them. Tools stacked in tidy lines. Wolves moving like shadows that remembered they had once been men and preferred not to forget it. Children watched from behind stacked wood with eyes too sharp for their ages. The woman with the scar leaned against a post, arms folded, mouth pulled wrong and still somehow smiling. The broad-shouldered woman ground steel against stone in slow, confident strokes without looking down. "Come." He didn't offer a hand. The bond tugged me anyway. I stepped to his side, 1 pace back without thinking, and matched him. "Look at the chin on her," someone muttered. "Small," another voice answered. "Small breaks easy." "Small doesn't always mean weak," the scarred woman cut in, voice steady and bored. "Use your eyes, not your mouths." We walked the ring. Faces followed us, some curious, some mocking, some open in a way that made the skin along my arms rise. I held my head up because I knew what lowering it meant to people like this. It meant permission. A woman with gray braids let her gaze slide from my face to the bite and back. "She'll last," she said. "If he wants her to." "He always wants," a man answered, not quite under his breath. Ronan stopped and let the camp stop around him. He didn't need to raise his voice. "Speak your doubts to me." No one did for a breath, then a boy too tall for his age and too sure of his own mouth tipped his chin up. "We used to hunt where we wanted, take what we wanted. You change that." "I change what makes you weak," Ronan said. "Raiding pens dulls your teeth. You want easy blood. Hunt something that runs." "What if hunger doesn't wait?" another boy asked, shifting as if he was used to people moving out of his way and punished when they didn't. "You come to me," Ronan answered. You hunt where I tell you. You bring back something worth eating. We don't ask, the tall one tossed back. You do, Ronan said. If you run under me. If not, run alone and find out how long you keep your throat. A low laugh from older men rolled across the circle. The boy's face colored. His eyes flicked to me and sharpened. Why her? He pushed. She's soft. She smells like house. Because she walked, Ronan said. The scarred woman's mouth twitched. Told you. The boy glared at me as if I had taken something he wanted. Say it then. Ronan's eyes slid to me. Say it. I belong to him. Louder. I belong to Ronan Veynar. The sound the pack made wasn't a cheer. It was a low thrum that moved through bodies like a law finding its voice. Heat ran from the bite across my chest and settled in my throat. The tall boy's mouth twisted. She's a farmer. We used to take farmers for sport. Ronan moved one step that didn't look like much until it was over. His hand caught the boy at the front of his shirt and lifted. The boy's feet left dirt. A small sound escaped him before he swallowed it. Ronan held him out at arm's length, steady as if the boy weighed nothing. Run under me, Ronan said, voice mild as cool water. The boy grabbed at the wrist holding him. He didn't move it. He didn't move Ronan. He kicked once, startled by his own uselessness. Ronan shook him once, an easy motion, and put him back on his heels without more effort than it takes to set a bucket down. Speak again, Ronan told him, with more care. The boy looked at me and then away. I run under you. Good. Ronan turned from him the way a man turns from a thing that has become uninteresting. The boy stepped back into his pack and tried to stand like a person who hadn't just been held up by the front of his shirt. We moved on. The scarred woman fell in behind us for a few paces. You enjoy standing in fire. I enjoy not looking at dirt. Keep that, she said. It irritates the ones who want to see you crawl. I don't intend to crawl. You might, she said, not unkind. If you do it because he told you to, not because they made you. I nodded and kept my eyes level. A pup streaked across our path and skidded to a stop when he realized where he'd run. He looked up with his mouth open, saw Ronan, saw me, and hid behind his mother's legs. She rested a hand on his head and met my gaze with a look I couldn't read yet. Respect, fear, curiosity, maybe all three. Don't pity them, Ronan murmured. I count, I answered. What do you count? Knives, doors. Hands that might help. Hands that won't. It's a habit. Keep it, it will keep you. We reached the far edge of the clearing where two tall pines leaned together and made a narrow gate into denser woods. He stopped. The hum behind us wanted to keep going. He sent one glance across his shoulder, and the camp paused as if someone had pressed a hand over its mouth. You will walk this circle with me every morning, he said. They will look. They will talk. You will hear what I tell you to hear. I heard plenty. You heard noise. There was shape in it. Leave me the shapes, he said. You keep your chin, you keep your feet, you keep your yes ready. What if I want to say no? You can, he said, calm. Say it to my face. The broad woman's voice drifted from behind, dry as kindling. Eat first. Argue later. Ronan almost smiled and didn't. We turned back toward the shelter. The smell of roasting meat reached into my belly and made the simple animal inside me pay attention. The scarred woman pointed her chin at a flat stone where rounds of rough bread cooled. Take, she said, or the pups will see you sway and tell the story forever. I took a round and tore it open. Steam touched my fingers and I swallowed fast. The tall boy watched, face still red. I offered him half. He blinked, as if the bread were a trap with a joke inside. He took it when Ronan's attention slid his way without landing. You left a note, Ronan said as we walked. Your father will find it. He'll pretend it's a poor joke until my mother makes him read it twice. He sits with a knife. He thinks it weighs enough to keep him awake. He will sleep without it. He will, I said, surprising myself with how certain it sounded. I couldn't see the porch. I could feel the weight of truth the bond sent when I asked it for something that mattered. He will wake and reach for the rope and find it on the table where he left it. He will not pick it up. Good. Did you go there? I asked. To the field. I don't sneak to doors, he said, but I marked your line and I feel it. If a wolf tests it, I'll know. I try to picture a line around a field, I said. I only see dirt. Then picture my hand. I do, I said before I could stop it. Gold warmed behind his eyes a fraction. Not softer. Only hotter, like a coal pulled near air. It was gone by the time we reached the shelter. He tipped his head at the entrance. I ducked inside first because I understood the order of things here. Light thinned. The hide dropped. The outside hummed like bees under a sun-warmed board. He stood a breath away. Heat came with him and made the small space feel smaller and not smaller at once. Stand. I stood in the center, feet set, shoulders level. He took his time turning, as if the act of turning were a lesson he wanted the walls to learn too. Look. I met his eyes and stayed there. The gold went deeper again. A sun through smoke. You will listen when I speak to you here, he said, tapping his own chest once with 2 fingers. When I pull, you will answer. I already hear you. Say it. I hear you. His hand hovered over the bite without touching. The mark tugged like a fish on a line. Again. I hear you. Say mine. Mine. He breathed in slowly, satisfaction flickering without turning into a smile. You hate wanting. I do. You want anyway. I could lie, the bond would make a fool of me. Yes. He stepped close until his chest touched mine. He didn't kiss me. He didn't need to. The weight of him told my body what his mouth would have said. His palm settled over the bite. My spine lined up under that pressure as if it were wood finding the right notch. Heat stole all the extra thoughts and left only the necessary ones. You will walk when I walk, he said. Eat when I tell you. Sleep when I tell you. Open when I press. Look where I put your eyes. If you learn fast, I will use you well. If you are slow, I will make you faster. What if I fall? You fall on me. What if I refuse to fall? I will put you where I want you and call it falling. The hide rustled. The scarred woman slid her head in, braid dragging across the frame. Mouths gathering near the fire, she reported, voice bored and pleased at the same time. They want a show. They will get silence, Ronan said. She smirked and vanished. He tipped his head toward the door and stepped out. I followed, 1 pace back, half to the left without being told. The camp had drawn tighter around the main fire, bodies angled inward, eyes bright. Someone started a laugh, sharp and showy. It died before it finished. He didn't lift a hand. He didn't growl. He looked across them once, a line of gold like a blade carried in the open. The clearing went quiet in a way that didn't feel forced, it felt inevitable. The wolves stilled. The children shut their mouths. Even the meat on the racks hissed more softly, as if it had learned manners. The broad woman's stone paused and then resumed with softer strokes. The scarred woman's mouth bent wrong and bright with satisfaction. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He let the hush spread until it touched the trees and came back. The camp settled under it. Not frightened, not soothed, just held. He looked at me last. The gold held my eyes and set them where he wanted them to stay. You will hear only what I tell you, he said low. I will. The bite burned once hard in agreement. The camp obeyed his silence like it had been hungry for it. I felt the shape of belonging tighten around me, not like a rope, like a ring closing, a law settling into place. I stood where he had put me, chin up, feet planted. The word I had chosen last night thick and hot in my mouth and tasting the same as it had under the moon. Mine. The hush he laid over the camp held. He started walking, and the quiet followed. a net he could pull tight without lifting a hand. I kept one pace behind and half to his left where he'd put me. The bite at my shoulder warmed in time with his steps. Every breath of the camp slid over us and broke without making a dent. Faces turned. The gray-braided woman watched with cool interest. The tall boy pretended not to stare and failed. The broad woman kept her blade on the stone, even strokes, eyes up. Varka leaned on a post, the scar pulling the corner of her mouth as if it had thoughts of its own. A voice near the racks tried to test the silence. Alpha, when do we hunt? When I choose. When she's done teaching us to stand pretty. Another muttered. He didn't turn. The quiet tightened one notch. I made my shoulders lower by force because I could feel them trying to creep toward my ears. We reached the main fire. Smoke went straight up a thin line. Wolves eased in among legs and dropped to their haunches, tongues out, eyes bright. The circle drew closer in small, uneasy steps. Speak, he told them, or stay silent properly. A heavy-shouldered man with a crooked nose flashed a grin. We heard you drew a fence around a field. I drew a line. Same soft. Not soft. You put rules around hunger. He kept on, enjoying his own voice. It doesn't read. Hunger learns, Ronan answered. Or it starves and makes room. The man's grin tilted toward me. You feed him now, farmer. I feed mine. Yours, he laughed, light and thin. Careful with that word. Ronan's head turned a fraction. The laugh died like a spark on wet wood. His eyes came back to me. Speak. I belong to Ronan Veynar. Again. I belong to Ronan Veynar. Louder. I belong to Ronan Veynar. It carried clean across the clearing. The bite burned hot enough to touch my teeth from the inside. A low thrum answered from the ring, not quite approval, not a threat. The sound a pack makes when something settles into place and the ground stops shifting. Varka's voice drifted over the fire. Good lungs. Good spine, the broad woman added, and a pup nearby stood a little taller without meaning to. Ronan moved on and I matched him. Heat rolled off his skin. Shadows opened to let him through and closed behind him like a wound knitting fast. He stopped in front of the densest knot of men and boys. Questions. The tall boy shifted, measuring how much mouth he could afford. Before he could spend it, a slick voice slid in from the far edge of the circle. Alpha. Heads turned. A lean man with a white line from cheekbone to ear stepped forward wearing a smile that never reached his eyes. Varka murmured almost to herself, Jorich. Jorich spread his hands like a man bringing gifts. News from the ridgeline. Elk where the creek forks. Tracks fresh. Big herd. Hunt. Gladly, Jorich said. But does the new rule apply? Do we ask permission to breathe now? A few thin laughs scratched the air and quit. Jorich's smile stayed. We also wondered, he went on, letting his glance slide across me as if I were a thing to pass under a boot. If you still accept a push. I remember when you liked being tested. Come test, Ronan answered. Jorich came. He didn't charge. He closed the last steps like a man who wanted to be seen closing. His hands went for Ronan's throat. They didn't get there. An arm turned up like a door that knows its hinges, and Jorich's wrist met bone and skidded. In the same motion, Ronan twisted and set him on one knee. It looked like nothing. It felt like the camp's breath caught and forgot how to start again. Jorich tried to surge. A palm found the back of his neck and pressed him down the way a man presses a board flat to see where it bows. The pressure wasn't showy. It was exact. He spat dirt and tried to turn the spit into a growl. It came out thin. Soft, he gasped. You've gone soft. You think softness carries a winter. She makes you weak. Ronan didn't look at me. He bent Jorich's wrist another inch, held it there for a slow count. When he let go, Jorich stayed kneeling because his pride wasn't strong enough to lift him. Jorich pulled air and found a last scrap of recklessness. I challenge. A sharp noise rippled through the ring. The gray-braided woman's face went blank. The broad woman set her stone down. You don't qualify, Ronan said. I'm Wolf. You're small, and I am bored. That's all that qualifies today. Jorich's mouth twitched. I remember when hunger taught you manners. I'm always hungry. I learned what to feed it. You feed it bread, no? I feed it obedience. He didn't raise his voice. Kneel, or I'll break the part of you that still listens. Jorich couldn't keep his eyes off me. He aimed a childish jab because he didn't know where else to put his fear. Make her kneel first. Heat slid through the pack, ugly and quiet. Varka pushed off her post. The broad woman's fingers flexed around her blade. Somewhere a child sucked in a breath and held it. You look at mine again, Ronan told him, almost gentle, and I take your eyes and make you smell your way home. The cold that landed after that sentence felt like water poured down the spine of the clearing. Jorich bowed to it before he realized his chin had dropped. He hit his knees, hard, and stayed there. Good, learn fast. I hate repeating myself. Ronan turned away as if the man had become furniture. The ring let out breath in unison, a quiet exhale that nodded to the way gravity still worked here. He addressed them all. We run the ridgeline at dusk. We come back with meat that kicks on the way down. We don't touch the line around the field. I'm done with that lesson. No growl, no shout. The order still landed in every throat. The pups matched their breathing to his syllables without knowing they'd done it. He angled his body toward me, a small shift that put the heat of him closer. Walk. We made another slow circle. Work resumed in pieces, like a held breath released, like a hand opening. Eyes still found me, less sharp now, less amused. The tall boy watched me like he'd learned a word and didn't trust his mouth with it yet. Near the skin racks, Ronan reached up, broke a strip of dried meat and handed me half. His fingers rode mine for the length of one heartbeat longer than they needed to. The bond answered as if I'd been touched everywhere at once. I chewed because it kept my mouth busy and my legs steady. Two younger wolves hovered just inside the edge of hearing, whispering badly. Human. She'll be a story by moonrise. Jorich will choke if he tries. The gray-braided woman cut in without looking. Use your eyes. He learned. Ronan's head tipped as if he enjoyed that answer. Then his attention landed back on me with a weight that put my spine back into the line he liked. Chin. I lifted it. Eyes. I met his. Say it again. I belong to Ronan Veynar. He stepped close enough that the heat of him reached my mouth. His hand lifted and hovered over the bite, close enough that the skin cried out for pressure. He left the space there on purpose, and watched what the wanting did to me. You will learn to crave, he murmured, too soft for anyone else. Not because I sweeten you, because I give your hunger a shape, and then fill it. I hate that. You will hate it more, he breathed, and you will open anyway. Heat climbed my neck, not shame, not fear, the plain reaction of a body that had been set to a new tuning and couldn't pretend not to hear it. I held my face still because I refused to give the camp a show. The bond hummed between us with the contentment of a law that had found its witness. Varka drifted past, lazy as a cat. He likes your mouth when it argues, she advised, just loud enough. Measure how long you keep it. I can argue all day. He won't let you. Ronan's gaze cut to the ring. The look alone fixed hands where they were. Stay at my side, he told me, this time for the pack to hear. If a hand touches you that isn't mine, it doesn't touch anything for a long time after. Men glanced at their fingers like they were counting them. The broad woman's mouth let a shadow of approval through. The tall boy tucked the last of his bread away as if that task could keep him from testing another lesson too soon. A boy no older than my brother sprinted close and stopped dead when he realized whose shadow he had entered. He stared at Ronan. He stared at me. His nose wrinkled. Human. Pup? Ronan answered without breaking stride. Use your eyes before your tongue. The boy flushed, ducked behind his mother's leg, and peeked out with a look that was more awe than disgust now. His mother met my eyes, guarded and steady, then tipped her chin half an inch. It wasn't welcome. It wasn't Not. Ronan stopped where we'd begun near our shelter. He gave the ring one last sweep, counting what I couldn't. When he had counted enough, he nodded and broke the camp back into movement. "Run your feet out," he told the boys. "Build the fire up. When the sun drops, we hunt." He flicked a glance toward Jorich, where he stood in the shade, nursing a throat and a pride. Jorich dropped his eyes. Lesson learned for now. Maybe not for long. Ronan stepped toward the shelter and let the hide fall behind us. The camp's noise narrowed to a steady hum, like bees behind a wall. He watched me for a breath, letting my breathing match the rhythm he wanted. "Do you understand what I did?" "You stopped a man without blood," I said. "You taught a boy to measure his tongue. You let them look at me and kept their hands. And you made me say it until it fit my mouth. And you made me walk where they could stare while you taught them what touching cost." A small exhale left him, satisfied and unsentimental. "You will learn the rest." "What rest?" "How to look back when you feel small. How to use wanting instead of denying it. How to keep your feet under you when you hate where you're standing." "I know some of that." "You know how to pretend," he said. "You will learn how to do it without pretending." He closed the distance until the space held nothing but heat, breath, and the mark humming under his palm. He didn't kiss me. He didn't need to. The attention itself was pressure enough to make my bones listen. "Speak. For you." "I belong to Ronan Veynar." Again. "I belong to Ronan Veynar." "Whose peace?" "Yours." "Whose hunger?" "Yours." "Whose yes?" "Mine." The bite flared like iron in a forge. He watched it move through me. The smallest nod acknowledged the way the answer fit. A shadow cut the seam of the door. The hide lifted. Varka slipped in, braid brushing the post. She looked pleased and bored at the same time. "Rivals settled for now," she reported. "Mouths need work. We'll run them out at dusk." Ronan didn't look away from me. "Make sure Jorich finds the back of the line." "He already knows where it is." Varka's eyes shifted to me. "You kept your chin. Keep it." "I plan to." "Plan snap," she said, amused. "Make it a habit instead." She pushed the hide aside, paused. "Bread when you can, farmer. He forgets to feed you when the killing is good." She slipped out. The hum returned. Ronan let his hand ride the air above the bite again, close enough to make it ache. He liked the ache because it taut quickly. "You will rest," he said. "Eat when the sun moves. Walk when I call. At dusk, watch us hunt." "You want me there?" "I want you seeing what rules make and what I am when I run. You're not a man when you run." "I am exactly what I am," he answered, and the gold in his eyes caught a sliver of light in a way that made my stomach forget it had food in it. He turned for the door, paused with his hand on the hide, and looked at me with a brief, assessing warmth that wasn't softness. It was possession pleased with its investment. "You held your chin," he said, "and I told you I would." "You did," but he left. The light thinned to a line again. The camp's sound took on the purposeful quality of a day with work to do. I stood where he had put me until my pulse matched the hum beyond the wall and the bite cooled from burn to steady heat. I sat and pulled the rest of the dried meat he'd left into my lap, ate with clean, practical bites, and drank from the cup that tasted like snowmelt. Through the hide, voices rose and fell. Laughter broke. A dog barked once and hushed. Someone started a song and forgot the words, and another voice took it up without making a fuss about the stumble. I pressed my palm to the mark and pictured my father sleeping through the edge of morning on the porch, the knife at last heavy enough to rest beside him instead of on him. I pictured my mother's hand smoothing the note flat. I pictured my siblings tangled like pups, bellies not empty. The picture slotted next to the heat and clicked into place. The word I had been made to say sat at the back of my mouth like iron I'd learned to carry. Outside, the day stretched its muscles for the run ahead. Inside, I held my chin in an empty shelter like a girl practicing for an audience that would always be there, and listened to the steady thread of his footsteps move through the camp, everything in me answering to their rhythm whether I wanted to or not. Dusk slid down the trees and made the clearing smell like wet bark and smoke. The pack sharpened into focus the way steel listens for a whetstone. I felt it without moving. The bite on my shoulder warmed and kept time with a pulse I didn't control. The hide lifted and he filled the doorway, heat first, then shadow, then the gold in his eyes. He didn't rush. He looked at me like a man checks a knot before he pulls the rope tight. Up. I stood. My legs remembered the circle we'd walked. My chin remembered where he had set it. The old part of me that wanted to vanish remembered it didn't get to vote anymore. Come. He turned and I fell into that one pace behind and half left without thinking. Outside, the camp gathered around its own hunger. Wolves threaded between bodies and dropped to their haunches like thrown knives sticking where they were meant to. Men tightened bracers, women stacked wood and cinched straps with a neat efficiency that didn't pretend to be gentle. Varka watched from a post, lazy and alert. Keep that chin, little farmer. I plan to. Plan snap. Make it a habit. Ronan stood where paths crossed and the hush bent around him. He didn't raise his voice. You will run clean. Bodies leaned forward, alive on a leash. You will bring back meat that fights. You will not touch the line around the field. Eyes slid across me and away. Heat lifted under my skin. The bite burned a steady yes that felt bigger than my body. He lifted his chin once more, and the quiet swelled and settled. You will remember who you run under. The pack breathed it in, and then he turned and the clearing opened. Wolves and men poured through the trees in a rush that didn't snap a twig. He didn't go yet. He pivoted back to me, and the circle remembered it didn't need to watch what he did next. Inside. He took the shelter with him and made it smaller by standing in it. The glow from the pit reached, touched the old scar from neck to shoulder, and made it look like writing. On your knees. The words struck the bite like a hammer. The floor rose slow. Dirt cool under skin still hot, smoke and fur and the musk that didn't have a farm name. The mark hummed and steadied my breath for me. He stepped close. His knees brushed my shoulders. He didn't have to touch the bite. The space between his palm and my skin did the work. Look. I looked up. The gold had gone deeper with the dark, like coals getting the air they wanted. You walked, you spoke, you held where I put you, he said. Now you listen. I'm listening. You will not barter with what you gave me. I won't. You will not hide a no in the mouth of a yes. I won't. You will speak the truth or you will keep your teeth together until you can. Yes. His hand hovered over the mark and the ache sharpened into something that felt like anger making a truce with wanting. What do you feel? Heat. Pull. You. More. Fear. And something I don't want to name. Name it. I won't. You will. He said. Not cruel. Inevitable. His thumb brushed the air above the mark. The ache brightened. Say mine. Mine. Whose? Yours. Say you hear me. I hear you. Where? In my bones. Good. He set his palm down. Not hard. Exact. My spine lined up like he liked it, the way his looks and steps had been carving it all day. The pressure was a quiet law. It made the rest of the world smaller and easier to hold. You hate wanting, he said. I do. Look at me and say what you want. Outside, feet crossed packed dirt. A pup yipped and got shushed from a warm throat. Wood cracked and fell. The night asked me to name what I'd left hidden. I let it out because keeping it had been harder. I want the farm safe. Already done. I want them to sleep. They will. I want to stop shaking in places no one can see. Not yet. Say what else? I won't. You will. He lifted his hand. The loss of weight was its own instruction. He crouched until his face was level with mine. His breath was a sparking distance away. He didn't close it. Use your words, Lenora. My name in his mouth lit the mark like a brand pushed back into coals. I want you. There, he breathed. See how clean truth is. It's ugly. It's real. Real makes work easier. You enjoy this. I enjoy you obeying. I enjoy you learning to want what I want. You think it's the same thing? It will be. He stood. The shelter felt smaller when he did. He listened past the hide with his head a fraction tilted. Scouts pounded past. The door lifted and fell. The camp remembered the rule about not looking into certain rooms. He set his hand back on the bite. Heat rolled and smoothed the sharp edges under my skin. You will kneel when I tell you, you will stand when I tell you, you will open when I press, you will answer when I call. I will. You will not ask for soft. I won't. You will not lie about wanting. I won't. Good. His fingers slid from the mark to my jaw and tipped my face that last half-inch he always wanted, just to see that I'd hold it without being held. He didn't take my mouth. He watched me want him to, and measured how I carried it. Tonight you watch us hunt, he said. You learn what I am when I run. What are you then? Exactly what you bought, he said. A man who keeps a field full. I didn't ask for a man. You asked for peace, I set the price. He released my jaw. My knees complained. I ignored them. He turned toward the door and paused. If a hand touches you, that isn't mine, he added, quiet enough that only the hide heard it too. It won't touch anything for a long time after. I can pull away. You won't have to. He was gone, taking heat and attention with him. Night pressed in at the seams. The mark slowed to a steady throb. I breathed out like I'd been keeping air for later. I followed him into the clearing's edge. Those who stayed tended fire and watched the dark. The sky turned the color of a bruise. He stood where the trees knitted together. He looked back once. Behind me. I kept my place while the line he led gathered and vanished into the pines with the kind of speed that should have broken branches and didn't. The forest closed. The clearing held its breath. Varka leaned against a tree like she had grown there. Watch. I watched. The fire threw long tails into the dark. The creek talked in its low voice like nothing important had changed. The run lived under the ground, a distant thunder that never arrived and still shook the ribs. The bond carried pieces, not pictures, not words, just motion made into law. The push and pull of bodies under one will, the bright edge of taking and the heavy, satisfied weight of bringing back. It set off a string of small fires under my skin I couldn't stamp with reason. You feel it, Varka said, wrong-angled smile tilted. I do. It hurts better if you don't pretend. I'm trying. You're doing well, she said, and the easy approval felt like a hand on a horse's neck. He'll bring you the smell. He thinks noses teach quicker than ears. Do they? You'll see. A shape limped out of shadow and found us with its pride first. Jorich. He looked at the trees like they might volunteer to take his side. Varka didn't shift her weight. Go away. I belong to the pack. You belong to your last lesson, don't sniff around this one. He ignored her and let his gaze settle on me. Comfortable, farmer. Better than you. He laughed once, dull. He circled a fraction as if to test space with his body. Varka didn't move. She didn't need to. I kept still, because stillness was louder than flinching. He reached without thinking, the way men who forget learn to move when they want the world to feel owned. He didn't touch me. A hand closed around his wrist out of the dark and stopped him like a gate. Ronan's hand. Jorich jerked. The grip didn't move. Did the lesson miss your ears? Ronan asked, bored. Or are you curious how they live without a head? Jorich swallowed. Don't use words, Ronan advised. They make you clumsy. He turned Jorich's wrist until the tendon sang a blunt, useful song. No blood. No break. A straight line drawn across pain that made the night pay attention. Look at your hand. Jorich looked because there was nothing else. Learn what it belongs to. Not you. Not now. Jorich nodded, ragged. Ronan released him and he backed into the dark like a man stepping away from a cliff he hadn't seen until he kicked gravel over the edge. Ronan didn't watch him go. Varka dipped her chin, lazy respect. Ronan gave her a look that meant more than words and less than orders. Then he turned to me. The run still lived in his eyes, pupils wide, gold burning at the edges. Inside. I went. The camp felt thinner with most of its teeth in the trees. The shelter breathed us in. He let silence settle over my shoulders until it felt like something I could wear. On your feet. I stood in the center, not touching the hides. He paced around me once, slow. He liked measuring what his rules had done to a body. He liked the angle of my chin when it didn't fight him. You felt it? Yes. Say it. Heat. The pull. The taking and the bringing back. You. Good. He stepped close, chest a breath from mine, not touching and still all heat. The mark rang. You want? Yes. You hate that? Yes. You will stop hating it. I don't believe you. You will, he said, like weather. Because I'll show you what wanting is for. For you. For both of us. The word both did something to my knees I didn't appreciate. He caught my chin between finger and thumb and held it. His other hand hovered over the mark long enough to turn ache into steady pain I could breathe with. You will learn to submit without shrinking, he said. You will learn to open without begging. You will learn to want and not be ashamed. I am ashamed. Not for long. He moved behind me and laid his palm flat over the bite. The weight dropped through me like a stone into deep water. My breath found a slower pace because his hand told it to. Say it. I belong to Ronan Veynar. Again. I belong to Ronan Veynar. Whose peace? Yours? Whose hunger? Yours. Whose yes? Mine. His mouth came near my ear. He didn't touch. The breath alone wrote a promise against the mark. You will beg. I won't. You will, and when you do, you'll know why. That's cruel. It's honest. He took his hand away. The emptiness he left was a test. I held it. He liked seeing if I could stand inside a shape he'd made and not move. A single howl rose in the distance and braided with another, then another, a roof made of voices. The hair along my arms lifted. The mark burned. My body answered with a low, helpless thrum I didn't know how to hide from myself. Hear that? I do. That's what I am when I run. It sounds like hunger singing. It's hunger with law, remember the law. What's the law? Mine. He stepped back. The room cooled a degree. He looked at me like a man looks at a tool he trusts to hold an edge. Not fond. Satisfied. You will lie down, you will keep your eyes open until I say. You will listen to the hunt and not make it prettier than it is. I won't. You will think about your door at home, picture it shut. Count the breaths under that roof. Put those numbers next to this wanting and learn they add. They don't steal. I'll try. You'll do it. I lay down because he wanted me to and because my legs had decided to belong to someone with a different life. The furs were warm. The shelter held his scent like a second skin. He stood over me and did nothing with his hands. The not doing pressed like a palm. Close your eyes. I obeyed. The dark wasn't empty. It pulsed with feet under trees, breath matched to one name, bright bursts of taking that carried no shame because law pointed and called it right. The bond threaded those beats into me until my heart chose between fighting and sinking. It synced. Good. He could have left. He didn't. He stayed until my body learned a new rule. Rest while watched. When he spoke again, it wasn't a threat, and it wasn't a comfort. You are mine, Lenora. I am yours. I will break you, he said, exact, until your mouth asks for what your bones already do. I won't ask. You will. He murmured, breath warm at the mark. And you'll be proud of it, because you'll know the price bought what you came for. What did I come for? Peace and me. Air left my chest and didn't return until I made room. He was a shape against the lower light, all heat and gold. He watched me hold both truths like he enjoyed the work. The howls rolled and thinned. The camp breathed in and out. Sleep. I can't. You can? You will. He turned and left. Night crouched at the seams. Outside, the hunt rose and fell. A tide I hadn't known was mine to hear. I lay still and counted breaths that weren't here. Garrick finally sleeping. Mira's prayer turned into quiet. Tamsin's soft whistle. Finn's stubborn snore. Milo's little sighs. I stacked those numbers next to the run and felt them multiply instead of subtract. The bite burned and cooled and burned. Shame and wanting tangled and stopped fighting. I stared into the dark until my eyes made their own light. My body trembled, not only from fear and not only from relief, from the weight of naming what I had kept hidden because it scared me to see it. I wanted him. I wanted the piece of me that answered when he pulled. I wanted the farm to sleep under that law. I wanted the run to keep its teeth as long as his hand kept our door. A long howl lifted and threaded away toward the ridge. I listened until it was only a thread and then nothing. Sleep found me the way dusk had, slow and sure, with his last words sitting like iron on my tongue and tasting like truth. I was his. He would break me, I would beg. And the part of me I had kept locked away pressed its forehead to that sentence and, for the first time, didn't feel wrong for breathing. Dawn skimmed the edge of the hides with a thin silver line. I woke with my hand on the bite and a throb under my palm that wasn't mine alone. It beat heavy and sure, and with it came a rush of hunger that didn't start in my stomach. It rose from someplace old that knows how to run without asking for a path. Footfalls reached the camp in a long wave, a chorus of breath, the clink of bone on leather. Wolves first, then men. The smell arrived before bodies, iron, cold pine, torn air. I pushed up. The shelter felt smaller, as if the returning pack had thickened the world and pressed it to the walls. The hide lifted. Varka's braid slipped in, then her wrong smile. She looked me over like a smith checks a blade. Up, little farmer. They bring the ridge home. I hear them. You feel him. I do. Good. Feet are steadier when the mouth admits it. She held the flap, and I stepped into a dawn that still wore night's breath. The clearing pulsed, bright with the joy only a clean hunt can buy. Wolves slid past with tongues loose and eyes hot. Men and women followed, shoulders marked with grit and old scars, poles across their backs strung with quarters of meat. Children darted near the edges until a look sent them back. Ronan came last, not because he was slow, but because everything else knew to go before him. Blood spattered his throat and dried on his knuckles. The old scar across his neck looked like writing cut by the ridge. When his eyes found me, the bite fired like it had teeth. Heat climbed my throat. I did not look away. He lifted his chin a fraction. The camp moved on the breath after, breaking into work without chaos. Racks filled. Knives flashed. The broad-shouldered woman set 2 boys to the fire, an older girl to water, and took the heaviest hunch herself. The gray-braided elder stood near the pot and watched with steady, measuring calm. Jokes rose with the smoke, sharp, proud. Eyes slid to me, curious and bright. Housebird woke. Housebird learned to belong. Belong is a big word for a small mouth. Let her use it, he likes the sound. I held my chin where I'd been taught. The hunger humming through my bones wasn't mine and was. My body read the pack's return like a second language it hadn't known it knew. Varka stood beside me. Breathe, don't count how many look, count how long you stare back. I can stare a long time. Ronan didn't come to me. He moved through his wolves, touching shoulders with a knuckle, knocking a blade straight with the back of his hand. He took a horn and drank. The broad-shouldered woman lifted the first tray from a rack. "Eat," she told the nearest circle, and the camp fell on the food with purpose, not scramble. Each took enough. None took more. A boy with shaggy hair slid near me, peering like I was a new tool. "Does the bite talk?" "It burns." "It helps you not forget." He nodded, then vanished toward the fire. Laughter rolled. A strip of meat wrapped in rough bread appeared at my elbow. The hand that offered it had old burn marks and a ring carved from horn. "Eat, housebird," the gray-braided woman said. "Standing on an empty stomach is foolish." "Thank you." "Don't thank." "Chew." I chewed. Grease ran across my tongue and woke the part of me that remembers we are animals first. The bond stirred with it and fed on the same thing dot across the fire. Ronan watched me. He didn't hide it. He didn't smile. The gold in his eyes kept steady, as if the light there was its own fire. A shoulder brushed mine, lazy and deliberate. I braced without losing the bread. The shove was light enough to pass for clumsy. "Careful," a voice drawled. "Housebird might fall." Varka turned her head an inch. "You want another lesson before your meet, Jorich?" "Just sharing air." Jorich's grin was tight. His wrist was wrapped in leather. He leaned as if to scent me and stopped when his eyes cut to Ronan. Habit fought caution and lost by an inch. He stepped back. "Welcome to the feast, farmer. You'll like the part where he makes you eat from his hand." "It will keep your mouth quiet for a breath," Varka said. "Spend it running," the broad-shouldered woman advised, not looking up from her knife. Warm amusement moved like heat from a coal. Jorich's jaw worked, then settled. He drifted off. The pack fed, mouths full and content, rough joy settling into bone. A tuneless hum rose, the sound people make when bellies are warm and legs are tired. It crawled under my skin and eased the shaking I'd been pretending not to notice. Ronan crossed the clearing without touch and still moved people. Space opened before him and closed after. He stopped across the fire and let the heat carve his face. He lifted his chin. "Come." One word. The bond yanked like a rope. I moved before the rest of me decided. Varka matched my step until we reached the distance she thought right, then let her weight fall back against her post. I walked between racks and men, feeling eyes measure my stride. I did not stumble. I stopped in front of him and looked where he wanted me to look. A horn sat in his hand. He raised it and held it near my mouth. The camp's sound drew tight. I felt the circle focus, the breath of it waiting, the hunger that wanted law. "Drink." I didn't lift my hands. I didn't lean away. I opened and took the rim between my lips. The liquid was warm and strong, smoke and clean stone. He tilted until my throat worked. Again. Heat slid down and spread smooth as melted snow in a new furrow. He lowered the horn and let the wet rim rest on my lower lip for a heartbeat before breaking contact. The gesture was small. The circle felt it like thunder. I kept my face steady because the way out was through. A strip of meat came next. He held it between two fingers, so I had to choose how to take it. I could have used my hand. I didn't. I leaned and took it with my teeth, careful as pulling thread. Salt and smoke burst on my tongue. My pulse found a rhythm that matched the heat in my shoulder. "Watch her," someone whispered. Ronan's gaze didn't leave my eyes. He held the rest until he was done watching me work for it, then let me have it. The pack's attention moved, restless hands, bright eyes, low chuckles. No jeers now. Curiosity. Approval. The edge of territorial satisfaction that lifted the hair on my arms. A boy blurted what he couldn't hold. She didn't flinch. "Because she knows math," the broad-shouldered woman said. "Eat what keeps the door shut." Jorich's voice drifted from shadow. "Eat what keeps your mouth on a leash." "Yours first," Varka tossed back. Ronan raised the horn again. "Drink." I drank. Shame and something hotter wrestled. Shame blinked first. A girl slid a plate toward me and backed away. A pup nosed the edge. His mother clicked her tongue and he sat with a thump that made men laugh. "Sit," Ronan said. He took my wrist and drew me half a step, decisive enough that my breath forgot its plan and followed his. He sat on a low round of bark and drew me with him until my hip landed against his thigh. His hand stayed at my wrist. His thumb found my pulse. He looked past me at the circle as if the moment belonged to them too. "Open." He brought the horn, then bread, then a bite of meat, measuring how much he could make me take without breaking the line of my chin. Each time his eyes stayed on mine. Each time he tipped the balance by a breath in favor of obedience and watched what that breath did in me. The gray-braided elder's mouth lifted a fraction. "It holds," she said. "Because she walks," the broad-shouldered woman answered. Varka lounged and looked like a story she wouldn't mind telling later. "We need a new name. Housebird won't do when she eats in the open." "Name her then," the tall boy called. "Doorkeeper," Varka tried. "Belonging mouth." She tipped her head. "No, that one's the Alpha." Laughter snapped bright and fell quiet when Ronan didn't share it. The pack put the game away. Heat bled through my arm where he held me and pooled in my lap. The mark burned in time with his thumb. The law of the circle pressed me into the shape I'd agreed to. Humiliation prickled like nettles. Desire rode close behind and was worse, for being honest. A child squeezed between bodies and stood too near Ronan's knee, staring at his scar like it might speak. His mother hissed and reached to snatch him. Ronan flicked 2 fingers. She froze. The pup leaned closer. "Does it hurt?" "When I forget who I am." "Do you forget?" "No." The boy nodded and scuttled away. The ring allowed that softness for one breath and tucked it back where it belonged. Ronan set the horn aside. He moved his hand from my wrist to the bite and pressed his thumb against the edge. Heat jumped so hard my vision freckled. I kept silent. It cost. He lowered his mouth until his breath touched my ear. "Hold your eyes." I held them. He didn't bite. He set his teeth near the old scar and gave that almost touch that unwound me last night. The circle couldn't see the tiny movement. It saw something else, my body remembering to obey, to open when told, to turn heat into steadiness instead of flinch. "Good," the gray-braided woman said, soft as a blessing. He drew back and looked over my head. "Eat. Sleep. Run when I call." He released my shoulder and took my hand instead, palm closing over my fingers for one long heartbeat. He didn't have to pull. I leaned the smallest degree because that was the shape of the law now, and my body had learned it. Jorich shifted near the shadows, jaw hard. Varka's weight rolled to the balls of her feet and stayed. He remembered his wrapped wrist and stayed too. The broad-shouldered woman wiped her knife and set it down with care. "Hands on the hides by noon," she called. "They'll be there," Ronan answered. His gaze dropped to my mouth again as if the camp were an audience and this a lesson more than a meal. "One more." I opened. He fed me the last piece from his palm. Salt, heat, smoke, and the steady taste of his presence. The ring murmured and then, like a cue, a low, layered howl rose. Not the wild hunt cry, but the inside the camp sound that carries approval and the promise of teeth aimed outward. It rolled through the trees and came back softer, wrapped the clearing like a low roof for a breath, and sank into my bones. The bite burned bright and settled to a steady thrum, a drum under my skin. "Listen," Varka murmured, "that's the sound you live under now." I trembled. Not only fear, not only relief. The small, terrible spark that had woken last night had no interest in sleeping. It made my hands want to shake and my chin want to hold. I chose the chin. My hands could shake later behind a hide where fewer eyes would count. Ronan's thumb stroked once along the edge of the bite, as if he could feel the argument inside me. And then he let go. The absence left heat like a sun-warmed stone under cloud. "Stand." I stood. The circle returned to work because he turned his attention that way. Knives moved, hides stretched, fire popped. Children argued in quick whispers and were silenced with quicker looks. The day that follows, hunts began, as if it had always been this day and this moment, one stone in the long road of their law. Varka bumped my shoulder. You kept your eyes. I almost didn't. Almost doesn't count here, she said. Only done. The gray-braided woman passed with bowls and gave me a glance that weighed what it needed and found it sufficient. Drink water. Hunger lies sometimes. Thirst tells the truth. I took a cup from a boy who looked surprised I knew how to lift my own hand. The water tasted like snow, under rock. Across the clearing, Ronan spoke with the broad-shouldered woman and two men with fresh cuts on their shins. He didn't look back at me for a while. I felt him anyway. The bond made the space between us busy. The heat at my shoulder beat a steady mark on the morning. Jorich slid to my elbow again, grin gone. He kept a distance that read as forced. Enjoy the show. It wasn't a show. It's always a show. He likes an audience for his rules. Rules keep the door shut. That's what you bought, he muttered. A shut door and a man you can't open without. Varka's voice came from nowhere, amused. Look at him grow, having his words, be proud. Jorich swallowed whatever else he had and drifted away. Varka watched him go with a cat's patience, then rolled her eyes toward me. Don't let ghosts like that keep you from eating. They talk till they're tired and then forget what the talk was. I finished the cup and set it aside. My hands weren't shaking now. The hunger that had rolled in with the pack burned more carefully. Ronan came back with the same gravity. The clearing made space because that is what it knew. He stopped close enough that heat found my mouth again. His gaze touched the bite, lifted to my eyes, and held. You obeyed. I did. You kept your chin. I did. You felt what I wanted you to feel. Yes. He nodded once. Recognition that the math had been done right. His hand hovered near my shoulder. He didn't touch. Tonight, he said, not a question. You will speak truth in the dark, and you will not choke on it. I'll try. You will do it. He turned to the ring. Work, sleep, watch the lines. When the sun tips, I call. The pack answered not with a cheer but with movement, the kind that gets work done without telling stories about it. The day leaned forward. I stood where he had put me and felt the last tremor leave my hands and travel deeper, a steady hum that would live under my ribs until night. The sun slid down the trees until the shadows grew long and cool. Smoke thinned. Work slowed to the kind of quiet that comes after a hard day. I felt him coming before I saw him, the bond tugging like a hook set in deep wood. When I looked up, Ronan was already there, watching me with the patience of a man who knew the next thing would happen because he wanted it to. Come. My feet moved. He didn't touch me in the clearing. He didn't need to. I followed him between racks and past low shelter walls, through a seam in the trees where the paths narrowed to a strip of dirt no wider than a boot. The camp's hum faded behind us. The forest took over, louder in its quiet than any crowd. Shoes. I hesitated, then bent and worked the ties loose. Cool earth took my weight. Pine needles gave under my soles with a sigh. A stone bit skin, small and sharp, and I adjusted without flinching. Good. Why barefoot? So you remember who owns your steps. The ground. Me. He led deeper, through a place where the branches ran low and close, then into a strip of open understory where creek sound stitched the trees together. The last of the light fell in thin bars. Moths drew soft circles around us. My heartbeat learned the path and set itself to his pace. Say what you think, he said. I think you like the forest more when it's dark. I like it honest. You think day lies. Day pretends to be gentle. You don't. No. He stopped near a pine thicker than any we had at the farm. The bark held old scars in the shape of claws that had passed this way over years. He faced me. The look in his eyes pulled the world down to a smaller circle. Hands. I lifted them. He took my wrists and laid them against the bark, palms open, not tied, not pinned, but placed. The tree felt rough and alive. Sap scent climbed up my throat until it tasted like green and iron at the back of my mouth. Keep them there. I can. You will. He stepped in. Heat rolled off him. He held my gaze until the rest of the forest blurred around the gold in his eyes. What do you feel? Heat, pull, you. More. Fear, I admitted. And anger. Anger at what? At you. Because you take. Because I let you. He studied my mouth as if the answer were written there. His palm hovered near the bite, and the ache sharpened until it made a small, bright point in my body I could name even if I refused to. Say the other part. I stared past his shoulder into the trees and tried to make them save me. They didn't. Trees know bargains when they hear them. They don't interfere. No. Say it. No. He closed the last inch and let his chest touch mine. Not soft, not crushing. Exact pressure, nothing wasted. The tree found my spine and held it. You will name what you want, he said, voice low enough to be all breath and iron. I won't. You will, he breathed, not moving, letting the nearness do it for him. Because you came here to learn the cost of peace, and you agreed to pay it with truth. My hands pressed harder against the bark. The bite throbbed. The creek sounded closer than it was. The water's steady talk, reminding me there are ways through rock if you don't mind taking a long time. It's easier if you want to break me, I said. Then I can hate you for it. I don't break tools I intend to use, he answered. I shape them. I'm not a tool. You are an answer, he said, heat sliding into the last word, and you are mine. That's the part I'm angry about. You're angry that the word fits. It shouldn't. It does. His hand lifted and hovered over the bite until the skin underneath ached to meet it. He waited. The waiting did the work. The air in my chest got tight. The world narrowed to the thin space between his palm and my shoulder. Say it, he murmured. My breath went out. My hands stayed where he had set them because I wanted to pass this lesson more than I wanted to run from it. I want you, I said, the words dragging out of me like stubborn nails. Good. He put his palm down. The pressure wasn't hard. The relief of being touched where the ache lived was worse than pain. I didn't make a sound. I felt his approval in the way his breath eased. You hate wanting. I do. You will learn not to. I don't believe you. You will, he said, steady as weather, because I will teach you what the want is for. For you, I said, hating how true it sounded, and for both of us. The word both made my knees weak in a way I didn't appreciate. The tree held me up. He felt the change and liked it. The small tilt of his mouth saying, he settled a tally in his head and found it pleasing. Tell me where you feel me. In the bite. Where else? In my chest. Where else? My mouth. He leaned in until his breath touched my lower lip. He didn't take it. He made me wait for what I had already admitted. Look at me. I did. Don't blink. I didn't. You belong, he said. Yes. Say how. In word. And want, I forced out, the shame and the relief battling in equal parts. Good. He lowered his mouth to my ear close enough that the shape of his words warmed the shell. Again. I belong to you in word and in want. More. In bone. He smiled then, a small satisfied cut of heat. His hand pressed a breath harder into the mark. Pain flashed white and sweet in a way I hated and recognized. You told them you belonged by the fire, he said. That was for the pack. This is for you. I know. Say it again. I belong to you in word and in want, I repeated, feeling the line of it fix itself inside me like a brace set right. He stepped back half an inch. The absence of his chest left cool air between us. My body leaned before my mind did. He watched the lean happen and let it finish without rewarding it yet. Walk, he said. He turned and started along the creek where stone broke the surface and made small white voices. I followed, barefoot still, feeling every pebble and root with a clarity I couldn't remember having as a child. He kept a pace that tested and respected. When a twig bit thin skin, I adjusted. When moss made a patch slick, I slowed and then found the line again. The bond ran like a wire between us, humming with each step. You watch your feet, he said after a while, and I watch your back. Good. You like hearing that. I like you doing it, he answered. Your mouth is extra. Varka thinks you enjoy the mouth. He almost laughed and didn't. Varka likes to narrate. You chose her. She chose me, he said. I made it law. And the broad woman. She chose the work, he said. I made room. And the gray-braided elder. She chose to outlive all our mistakes, he answered. We listen. We moved until the camp's hum was a memory and the trees pressed closer. He stopped where a fallen trunk bridged the creek. He put a hand on its rough spine. Up, I climbed. The bark dug into my arches. The water below ran black and bright at the same time. He put his hands near my hips, not touching, ready without coddling. I crossed the length, slow and sure, and stepped down into leaf litter that took my weight with a soft sound. Again, he said, and we did it backward. This time his hand brushed my waist when I landed. The touch was a test, not a prize. Heat roared through me like a fire allowed air. Hold it, he said. I am. Show me. He took my wrists and placed them at my sides. He waited. The creek made its small music. An owl called once from the darker line of firs. I stood, heat going nowhere, wanting push into motion and being told to sit and learn. Words, he prompted. I want you, I said without dressing it in anything. More. I want your hands on me. Where? I shut my eyes and opened them again because that had been the rule. Everywhere. He watched me own it. He let the admission make me taller instead of smaller. His mouth found my ear without touching it. Good, he breathed. Tell me what I get, I said, aware of how small the question could sound and wanting to hear him say the answer anyway. Peace, he said. Power, a door that stays shut, a pack that will die on your line if asked. Me. You already said peace. You didn't believe the rest yet. I don't know how to hold it. You learn, he said. You already are. He turned and started back toward the camp. I followed. The ground felt familiar now, even with pain rising and falling under my soles like a second pulse. A branch snagged my hair and tugged. I didn't flinch. He didn't slow. He knew I would free myself. He liked it when I did. Stop. I stopped. He turned and took my chin in his fingers. Not kindly, not cruelly, just to put it where he wanted it. No wolf touches you, he said. No man tries. If a hand lifts toward you in this camp and it isn't mine, you call me. I can handle a hand. You can, he agreed, but you won't have to. I will be the lesson they remember. Jorich is the kind to try when you aren't looking. I am always looking. You can't be everywhere. I am where I need to be when I need to be, he said. That is what being mine buys you. It is not softness. It is coverage. I don't want to be a shield someone else has to hold. You aren't a shield, he said. You are the reason I carry one. That stole my breath. He saw it and let the truth land, a weight I hadn't prepared to take. He liked watching me adjust under it and find my balance. Say it, he prompted, as if the words would set the weight more comfortably. I belong to you in word and in want, I managed. And you belong to me in law. He inclined his head, surprised for the first time in a way that pleased him. "Good," he said, and the single word felt like a hand on my back pushing me into the shape I had chosen. We reached the seam of trees where the path widened and the camp's scent moved toward us, smoke and fat, and the faint sharp note of tanned hide. Voices drifted, the kind of laughter people allow themselves when the work lies out on racks and the knives are clean. "Shoes," he said. I slid them back on and tied the straps. The leather felt wrong at first, then right, like putting lids on jars you had cooled on a winter sill. He watched my fingers, the quick work, the way I tugged each knot to make sure the hold would last. "Walk beside me," he said. I did. We stepped into the edge of the clearing. The first faces to see us were the young and the old, the kind who count bodies without pretending not to. Varka's mouth tipped at one corner as if she'd bet on the shape of us in one small coin. The broad-shouldered woman glanced, nodded, and returned to scraping a hide with quick, economic strokes. The gray-braided elder lifted her chin the length of half a breath and let it fall, which meant something here I couldn't translate yet. Jorich stood near the shadows again, jaw tight. He watched us and then looked away, the way a dog looks away from a bone that isn't his when the owner enters the room. He was learning. He didn't like what the lesson cost. "Stop," Ronan said, and I did. He faced me in clear view of anyone who cared to witness. He lifted my hands and set them lightly, deliberately at my sides. "Speak the truth." "I belong to you in word and in want," I said, eyes on his even though I felt the weight of others. "I feel you in my bones. I feel you in my mouth. I hear you when you don't speak." He didn't touch the mark, he didn't need to. It burned under my skin as if his fingers were there anyway. He held my gaze until the shaking that remained learned where to live and stopped trying to own my whole body. "Again," he said. I repeated it. This time my voice didn't thin under the heat of eyes. It held dot. He leaned the smallest degree, close enough that only I could hear. "Now for me." "I want you," I whispered. "I want your hands on me. I want the pull. I want the law." The last word surprised me and didn't, he knew it would. His breath warmed my cheek once, quick as a match. "Good," he murmured. Behind him, someone let out the kind of low approval meant for the throat, not the ears. A stool scraped. A knife knocked a stone and sent up a brief, bright spark. The night gathered itself on the edges of the clearing, ready for the next thing. "Go drink," he said louder for the camp. "Go sleep, keep the lines I call when I want feet." He turned his head and the circle obeyed. Movement started again, clean and simple. He looked back at me and tipped his chin toward the shelter. Inside. I walked beside him that last stretch. The hide fell, closing us in the warm, small space that smelled of smoke, and a trace of pine stuck to my ankles. He stood until the quiet arranged itself to suit him. Then he stepped close enough that the edge of the world blurred again. "Say it once more. I belong to you in word and in want. And I want you. And I will not lie about wanting." "Good." He let his hand hover over the bite long enough to make it ache and then didn't touch at all. He left the space there on purpose, a hollow I had to learn to carry. The lesson cut clean. "Rest," he said. "When I call, you come." "I will." He held my eyes one more heartbeat, marking the agreement without needing to press skin to make it stick. Then he turned and lifted the hide. Noise slid in from the clearing. He stepped through it and was gone. I stood in the small room and let my breath learn how to be easy again. The bond hummed steady, as if it had found a new pitch and liked it. I touched the straps of my shoes. Then the bark dust caught in my hair, proof of the tree that had held my back while I learned how to speak. Outside, Varka laughed once, low and pleased. The broad-shouldered woman gave someone a job. The gray-braided elder's voice slid over the hum like clean water over stone. I lay down and stared at the hides overhead until the weave made sense and then didn't. The truth I had spoken burned without blistering, I didn't know if I feared him more now or wanted him more. I knew one thing clearly and hated how good it felt to hold it, and I belonged. In word, in want. And for the first time, the word didn't choke me on the way out. Night deepened until the seams of the hide turned black. The camp settled into the low rhythm of a place that has eaten and worked and is ready to be quiet. I lay on the furs and counted the breaths outside. One laugh from Varka, the scrape of a blade, a pot set down, until the sounds thinned to embers. The bond tugged steady and patient the way a tide draws at a moored boat. I knew what it meant before the flap moved. He came in without hurry and filled the room with heat. The gold in his eyes held its own light. He shut the hide with a flat palm and stood there a breath, letting the air arrange itself around his rules. Up. I rose. My body remembered where to put the weight when he used that word. My chin found the height he liked. The bite warmed in a slow bloom, like coals stoked with a stick. Hands. I lifted them. He took my wrists and turned my palms forward as if he were showing the room I was unarmed. He didn't bind me. He didn't need rope. He had the mark. On your knees. The floor was cool against skin. Not cruel, only exact. He watched the shape of me settle and nodded once, satisfied the lesson from the trees hadn't evaporated at the door. Look. I looked up. He stepped close. Heat moved across my face. The old scar on his neck caught the dim and looked like writing again, a law carved into skin. Bear the mark. My fingers found the neck of my tunic. I loosened the ties enough to give the shoulder room. The cooler air hit skin and made me aware of everything at once, his nearness, the faint smoke in the hides, the small line of my own breath. Still, he crouched and set a palm near the mark without touching. The space between his hand and my skin ached in a way I recognized now. He liked to teach with almost. It made the body tell on itself. Tell me where you feel me. In the bite. Where else? In my chest, in my mouth. Good. He closed the last inch and pressed his palm to the mark. Not hard. Exact. The pressure dropped through me like a weight finding the pocket made for it. My breath hitched, and then learned a slower pace because his hand told it to. Say what is true. I belong to you in word and in want. Again. I belong to you in word and in want. Whose peace? Yours. Whose hunger? Yours. Whose yes? Mine. He watched the last word change the way I held myself. I felt it too, the line fixing inside me like a beam set into the right notch. His mouth tilted the smallest degree, not praise, recognition. Stand. I stood. He placed me 2 steps back and 1 to the left, then turned me to face the hide wall. My hands stayed loose at my sides because he had not told me otherwise. Palms on the wall. The hide had a cool give, the structure behind it didn't. He came close enough that heat kissed the bare strip of skin he'd uncovered. Chin. I lifted it. Open your mouth. I parted my lips. He put 2 fingers under my chin and tipped my face until my throat lengthened. He didn't put anything in my mouth. He held me there and watched the way my breath learned to live with the posture. You feel humiliated, he said. Yes. You feel it burn. Yes. You will learn to turn that heat. I don't know how. You will, he said, certain as weather, because I will show you what it's for. He lowered his mouth to the curve where neck meets shoulder and let his breath touch the skin. No bite, no mark, just breath. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't cruel. It was a promise written with heat. My knees loosened a fraction, and I made them remember their work. He enjoyed that more than if I had fallen. Words. I want you. Where? Here. I managed, and the confession pulled my mouth dry. More. Your hands. On me. Where? Everywhere. Good. He stepped back and the cool rushed in. I shivered and hated that I liked being returned to myself only because it meant he could take me again. He turned me by the shoulders and walked me backward with his eyes until the furs caught behind my calves. Down. I went. He stayed standing and looked down at me like a man studying a tool he means to use hard and well. He did not touch. He let the not touching press. Hands behind your back. I crossed my wrists and let them rest there, palms open. The posture made my chest rise. It made my breath show. He watched, measuring how much I could hold before I tried to hide inside my own body. Eyes. I met his. The gold felt nearer than it was. A thin sound moved outside the hide. Varka's voice, amused, low, and passed. The camp didn't intrude. It witnessed. He liked that line. Say you feel me when I don't touch you. I feel you. Where? In the mark. In my chest. In my mouth. You will say it without breaking eye. I will. Now bare your throat. I tipped my head back. The room turned into angles of hide and smoke above me. He lowered until his teeth grazed the edge of the bite. Not a bite, a whisper of one. The old wound became a bell struck soft. The sound ran through me in a line. Hold. I held. He waited. The waiting did its work better than force would have. When he finally put his mouth to the mark, it was only for the length of a breath. Mouth closed, teeth a suggestion. The pressure laced heat through me and loosened a knot I didn't know I'd tied. I breathed out and heard myself make a sound no softer than a word, and no louder than a prayer. Again, he prompted. I belong to you in word and in want. His hand slipped from my shoulder to my jaw and fixed it in a grip I could push against but didn't. He angled my face until he could look into me from closer than breath. The room shrank to the place where his attention lived. You will not lie about wanting, he said. I won't. You will not ask for soft. I won't. You will open when I press. Yes. He released my jaw and turned away, slow, as if he enjoyed letting the absence land. He went to the corner where a small cup sat and poured water. He drank and then lifted it toward me. He didn't bring it to my mouth. He made me come to him on my knees and take the rim between my lips the way he had at the fire. The water tasted like clean stone, and something like snowmelt and the new humiliation that came with knowing I opened to simple things now because he asked it. Good. He set the cup aside and stood very still. The stillness was a pressure of its own. I could feel his looking on my skin. On your feet, he said finally. I rose. He stepped behind me and set his palm on the mark once more. The weight told my bones where to be. He pressed a fraction harder until my spine found the line he liked and then eased off, letting my muscles learn the shape, without the force. Say what you are to me. Mine, I answered, and the word burned hotter for how he had taught me to mean it. Say what I am to you. Law. His breath left him like someone satisfied to hear the truth spoken by a mouth they have trained to say it without choking. Turn. I turned to face him. He caught my wrist, lifted my hand, and set it on his chest over a heartbeat that ran hot and fast and steady. He pressed until my palm learned the rhythm. Count. 1. Again. 1. I whispered, feeling foolish and undone and steadied all at once. You hear mine, he said. I hear yours. His finger found my pulse where his thumb had lived earlier. Math. There's more than numbers, I tried, because I needed to say something that wasn't surrender, even as my body lined up to it. There is, he agreed. There's law. There's cost. There's the noise that lives in your mouth and the quiet you put in your bones. He let my hand go and stepped so close there was nothing between us but heat and the work of breath. Now speak the truth you almost swallowed. I want you, I said. And my voice didn't break this time. I don't want to want you. I still do. You will stop hating it, he said, not unkind, because you will see what it buys. Peace. More. You. More. Cover. I said, remembering the trees and the path and the way he'd caught Jorich's wrist without hurry. A door that stays shut. Good. He leaned until his mouth touched my ear, not kissing, only letting the heat write the words there. You are mine. The sooner you beg, the sooner you'll understand what peace truly costs. I flinched at the word beg because it was a door I had not agreed to open. He felt the flinch and didn't soften it. He let me live with it, the way he had let me live with the ache, before he pressed his hand. I won't, I breathed, because the part of me that carried my father's stubbornness needed to say something that sounded like defiance. You will, he answered, sure as rain. And when you do, you will be proud you knew why. He stepped back a single pace, the room expanded. My head cleared enough to know that nothing in me had been damaged, and yet everything in me had been rearranged to face the same direction. Lie down, he said. I went to the furs and lay on my side, shoulder bare, hair pulled forward so the mark was open to the cool. He knelt and set his palm over it one last time, a weight that felt like a seal. Then he lifted his hand and stood. Eyes open, he ordered, as if sleep were an option he could control too. I'll try. You will do, he corrected, and there was no harshness in it, only the clean edge of his certainty. He went to the door and paused with his hand on the hide. He looked back to check that the shape he'd put me in still held. It did. Do not hide your wanting from yourself, he said. Hiding makes it cheap. You are not cheap. He lifted the hide and slipped through. Cool air and the thin noise of camp moved into the space he left, then settled. I stared at the seam where the leather met the post and let my pulse find a calmer ground. It took time. He had taught me new math, and my body was still working the sums. Outside, someone stoked the fire and a soft rain of sparks flared and died. Varka laughed once, low and fond. The broad-shouldered woman gave a quiet order, and the answer came in footfalls. The gray-braided elder spoke, and the camp hummed in agreement. The world beyond the hide carried on with law and habit. My world had narrowed and sharpened and lay in the heat of a handprint that was no longer on my skin, and would not leave it for a long time. I rolled carefully and pulled my tunic up over the shoulder bone until the cool was gone. The mark burned under the cover, as if heat could pass through any cloth I wore. I thought of the porch at home, rope on the table, knife unused. My father's sleep finally heavy enough to keep him from counting the dark. My mother's breath no longer tied to a prayer. I put those pictures next to the word beg, and let them sit there until the panic in me blinked and had no choice but to look. I couldn't tell if fear or desire held more room in my chest. It changed with each breath. The bond hummed steady, as if it didn't care which one won so long as I kept listening. I hated that. I loved that. I didn't know what to do with the mix except hold it without spilling. The camp fell quieter. A log settled. Rain started somewhere far off, a whisper the trees brought to us slow. I lay awake and rehearsed the truths he'd made me speak until they stopped scraping me raw on their way out. The last one, you are mine, fit in my mouth now without choking. The new one, the sooner you beg, sat like a hot stone I was not ready to touch. I closed my eyes because he had not ordered them open again. Sleep did not come quickly. It stood in the doorway and watched until I made room for it alongside everything else. When it finally stepped in, it did not ask for permission. It came like his voice does, sure and unhurried, and I let it because I had spent myself on a different kind of obedience. Before I slipped under, I put a hand on the mark and made a quiet vow I didn't say aloud. I would learn the math. I would count doors shut, and breaths even, and the sound of the pack holding the line. And if the cost was what he promised, I would measure that too with the same blunt honesty he kept asking from me. Whether that meant I feared him more or wanted him more would have to wait for morning. For now, the truth was simpler and heavier. I belonged, in word, in want, under law, and for the second time in as many nights that truth tasted too much like relief to spit out. Morning slid under the hides in a thin gold line. I woke with my hand on the bite and the slow, sure throb that never belonged to me alone. The camp was already moving. Rope creaked. A whetstone whispered along a blade. Someone laughed in a raw, early way that sounded like a throat getting used to air. Smoke climbed straight into the cold. The bond tugged me toward the door as if a rope had been tied under my ribs and pulled tight from outside. I stepped out into a clearing that behaved like a river. Cool, sure of itself, indifferent to the body standing in it. Varka lounged at a rack with her braid over one shoulder and that wrong tilted mouth that never settled into a full smile. "Morning, little farmer." "Morning. Keep your feet under you." "They're there." "Good, keep your chin too, they're going to try it." On the far side, the broad-shouldered woman had boys stacking wood in neat rows and men hauling hides with their backs straight because her eyes told them to. The gray-braided elder stood at the pot, steady as a wall. When she lifted her chin, the length of a breath, hands nearby found something better to do. A pup spiraled through ankles and got nudged back with a sound that never had to rise. Ronan came out of a shadow seam the way a mountain arrives when the mist thins. The scar across his neck looked like script cut by rock. Gold caught in his eyes and held. His gaze found me. The bite warmed like iron waking in coals. "Walk." The word slid into me and settled. I fell one pace behind and half left. He didn't slow. The pack made space without thinking, as if their bodies had been taught by long practice that standing too close to his path was a misuse of bone. Voices followed in a low ripple that pretended not to be for me and failed. Housebird stood through the night. Housebird learned a bigger mouth. "Wait for real weather, we'll see. She eats when he tells her to." "Better than eating your own foot," the broad-shouldered woman cut across, bored and accurate. "Keep that mouth for breathing until your hands learn anything." Laughter struck and flattened on its own when Ronan's glance moved across it. He didn't glare. He existed, and the sound stepped aside. Jorich waited near the tree line where the shade glued itself to bark. His wrist was wrapped in a strip of leather. He shifted a few paces to put himself in our way, small enough to be deniable and large enough to be seen. "Alpha," he crooned. "A fine morning to parade law." Ronan did nothing with his mouth. The silence he laid between them weighed more than a threat. The ring leaned toward it like cold hands toward fire. Jorich's eyes slid to me like burrs. "Less frightened today, farmer. Courage, or no imagination." "Imagination is your trade," Varka drawled behind him without moving her shoulders. "Keep it close." He didn't give her the reaction she collected for sport. He fastened that thin attention on me. "Tell us, Housebird, what did you sell to make our Alpha draw fences?" "Peace." Big word in a small mouth. "So is hunger," the broad-shouldered woman answered as her scraper hissed along hide. "We teach it where to eat." Jorich glanced at her and found nothing soft to push. He leaned enough to make the space itch. He'll tire of newness. He'll remember what he is. "He remembers," Varka said. "You're the one who forgets." Work slowed in a ring around us. Men let rope hang a fraction to listen. Women let a knife hold its own weight for a heartbeat more than it needed. The gray-braided elder stayed still, which made the quiet stricter. Ronan lifted 2 fingers just enough to mark the next moment as his. "Speak," he told Jorich, bored as weather. "Or work." Jorich bared teeth in a shape that wasn't a smile. "We wonder if a farmer can carry an Alpha's law. We wonder if that mouth can hold the bite without choking. We wonder if the thing in her chest will outlast a real winter." "You wonder because your head is empty when your mouth is open," the broad-shouldered woman said. "Close one." Heat climbed my face and settled into bone without shaking it. Ronan turned his attention on me and the mark flashed in reply, a clean, obedient burn. "Stand," he said, though I was already standing. "Stand in the fire. Keep your chin." I felt the heat of every look. mocking, measuring, some hungry for a crack, a few open in a way that surprised me. The old part of me that knew how to shrink tried once to fold under my ribs and failed. I locked my knees and kept my eyes where he had set them. Answer them as mine. My mouth went dry and then remembered its job. The words had been worked into me until they fit. Saying them with this many throats waiting turned them bright again. I belong to Ronan Veynar. The ring murmured, not enough. Ronan didn't blink. In word. Louder, Varka suggested, lazy and pleased. In word, I repeated and sent it across the clearing. And, Ronan prompted, letting the air between us pull me forward. And in want. That landed like iron on wood. A boy flushed to his ears. An older man's mouth twitched ugly. Someone coughed a laugh back down. More. In bone. The gray-braided elder inclined her head the length of a breath. The broad-shouldered woman's scraper slid in one long, satisfied pull. Varka's mouth tilted as if she'd collected a quiet wager. Jorich snorted, a small contempt from a safe place. Daylight words are cheap. Then bring me heavier, I said, hearing my own voice and refusing to flinch at what I sounded like inside it. He blinked because he'd been counting on a tremor. His grin rebuilt itself with new, clumsier edges. Tell us the price. I already paid it. If you like counting coin, count the doors that stay shut because of mine. Murmurs shifted. Her father's porch. The line around the field. Pups who won't learn easy sheep. Grudging. Real. Ronan didn't move. He let them do the math. When he spoke, it landed flat and certain. She is mine. A hand touches her, and that hand doesn't touch anything for a long time. No one laughed. It wasn't a joke. It was inventory. Jorich looked at earth, at trees, at me and away again, as if every direction held a lesson he didn't want. He slid back into shade because his bones remembered what his pride would rather forget. Ronan turned enough to put his heat on my skin while his eyes held the rest. Speak for me. I found the shape he wanted where the truth lived and brought it to my mouth. I belong to Ronan Veynar, in word, in want, in bone. The sound the pack made then wasn't mockery. Part of it was pleased. Part of it was the practical acceptance of a tool tested and not found wanting. A few throats held back. Law doesn't all settle in a morning. The broad-shouldered woman slung the hide to a line. You heard the sums. Hands back to work. The day won't scrape itself. Movement resumed with that clean efficiency they wore like a second skin. Rope creaked. Water walked from buckets to pots. A boy overreached his voice and checked it when the elder's gaze turned half an inch. Ronan shifted just enough to shorten the space between us. The bond tugged hard, and then eased like a rope paying out to the right length. He did not touch. He let the promise do the work. Eat, he told me, and nodded toward a flat stone where bread steamed beside meat and greens. Stand where they can see you. I went. Varka fell into my shade like a cat who can nap in a war. Hard part's done, she observed, for this hour. Hours are what you get, use them. The bread scalded my fingertips. I tore it open. Steam carried clean grain, smoke, a hint of a kitchen I wouldn't see today. For the space of chewing, the clearing shrank to simple math. What a body needs to keep standing. When I looked up, Jorich was staring like a man trying to decide which part of watching offended him more. He lifted his chin with a jerk when he saw me catch him. Don't waste eyes on him, Varka murmured. Spend them on the ones who need to learn how to look. Who? She tipped her chin at the tall boy who'd once dangled by his shirt. He watched me like he'd learned a new word and wasn't sure it belonged to him yet. I held his gaze one beat past comfort and gave the smallest nod it's possible to give while still calling it a nod. His spine remembered itself for a second before he busied his hands with rope, because that was safer than standing inside the look. Ronan returned to the center and let the camp take his pace like a breath. Orders felt like wasted air. Habit carried most of the weight. He walked a perimeter, pressed a hand to a man's shoulder where a bandage needed changing, knocked a boy's heel into better footing, and never pretended it was kindness. It was maintenance. He came back only when the camp had put itself where it belonged. Walk. We circled again. The ring didn't close around us, it flowed past. A woman with a baby on her hip watched me with the private assessment women learn when men are busy issuing public ones. When our eyes met, she gave the smallest lift of chin. I matched it. No softness. Just law. You stood, Ronan said. I did. You spoke. I did. You didn't run. I wanted to. You didn't. The bite warmed at the approval he never wasted on praise. Varka drifted near as if the wind had pushed her there. Mouths are quieter, she mused. He'll find new noise at dusk. He won't get far, Ronan answered. He knows the edges for today. For today? Varka agreed, amused. He's a man who likes forgetting. Some need reminding, that's what a pack is for. The sun climbed and peeled cold off the clearing. The smell of hides sharpened. I drank water that tasted like stone under shade and counted swallows to anchor my hands. The gray-braided elder's glance passed over me like frost over a field and moved on, as if assessing whether the seed would take. Whatever she read, she kept. Work wore the morning into afternoon. Rope, blade, feet, heat, the patient grind of peace as habit. I learned who could work and joke and who needed quiet to keep from cutting their own thumb. Peace here wasn't a blanket. It was a practice. When the light turned tired and honest, the broad-shouldered woman sent bowls down the line with insulting accuracy, landing them in hands that were ready before they knew they were. One stopped in mine like it had a mind. Put it in you, she advised without looking up. He'll take plenty out tonight. My gut tightened with the kind of feeling that tastes like fear and want mixed. I ate because she was right. The stew tasted of bone and smoke and the kind of fat that sits in ribs and waits for dark. Ronan stepped into the center where all paths point whether they mean to or not. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Listen. The camp fell into that quiet that isn't silence so much as agreement. This morning you asked if words live long enough to matter. The sentence hung. People remembered their swallowed laugh and left it where it was. Tonight you will watch truth learn a bigger mouth. A ripple moved through them, not crude, not gentle. The sound a pack makes when it hears a lesson coming and wonders if it will taste like blood or law, or both. He faced me and let everyone watch his attention land. Heat crawled over my skin like a hand smoothing grain. By nightfall you will prove yourself fully, not just in word. The pause stretched like a rope between two posts. He made me cross it upright while every throat counted my steps. In want. My breath stuttered and found the rhythm he liked. The mark burned bright and steady. It wasn't only fear. My hands held because I told them to, and they had learned to listen. Varka's mouth bent, delighted and wrong. There's your weather report, she murmured. Plan your breathing. Jorich laughed once short. It died early when he heard how small it sounded in his own mouth. The gray-braided elder didn't blink. The broad-shouldered woman kept her bowls moving. No moment tugged her off her job. The pack as a whole shifted with the unease and joy of witnesses about to earn a story their hands would tell for weeks. Ronan didn't look away. Not hearth-possessive, law-possessive. The kind that draws a line around a field and keeps whatever would make it a lie outside that line. Prepare. For what? For truth. I can hold it. You will stop holding, he said, unhurried. You will let go. The pack made a low sound that wasn't laughter and wasn't a howl. It was the sound of animals recognizing weather and needing to run toward it. The sun slid lower. Work resumed in the quiet key of people saving something for what the day is bringing. I returned my bowl. Varka thumped it down, leaned close, with the kind of fondness that could break a neck and then finish her nap. Don't get clever, she said. Clever snaps, make it honest, it holds. I'm doing my best. Don't try, do. I set my fingers lightly over the mark until the heat evened. The trees at the clearing's edge looked like a mouth that had already decided to swallow whatever stepped past it. I breathed until my ribs behaved. I counted the small things still in my control and found they were enough to carry me until dark. Ronan passed near, close enough that heat lifted the small hairs along my jaw. He didn't touch. He didn't speak. He let the space between us finish the morning's work. "Ready?" he asked finally, voice low as iron. "Yes." "Good." He looked over the camp once more, laying his attention across it like the flat of a blade to check for warps. None leaned into it. He nodded. "Eat, rest, keep the lines." He didn't add the rest. It lived in the angle of his shoulders and the relentless beat of the bond under my skin, a drum that would not change its rhythm to suit anything softer. By nightfall, my body would stop pretending. My mouth would make sounds I had kept behind my ribs like a secret I thought kept me strong. The pack would watch and measure truth with the only tools that mattered here. Fear breathed fast and then obeyed. Want breathed slow and did not apologize. I kept my chin. I belonged. The rest was coming. Night folded over the clearing until the hides went black at the seams. Work thinned to the quiet movements that belong to a place that has eaten and stacked its tools. I stood where he had put me, hands loose, chin set, the mark pulsing under my palm like a drum that refused to match any rhythm but his. When the flap moved, heat came first, then shadow, then the gold that held its own light. "Come." I stepped into the strip of path between pines. The camp slid behind us in a low hush of embers and breath. The forest took over, damp and clean, sap and crushed needles, the undernote of river. Moths wrote soft circles in the air. "Shoes." I untied the knots and set my feet to the earth. Cool bit at my skin. A thin stone found the ball of one foot. I shifted and kept moving. Good. We went until the creek widened into a black, slow bowl that caught the moon in pieces. He stopped. The scar at his neck looked like law chiseled into flesh. Kneel. The ground was wet and exact. Fabric darkened at my knees. I pressed my palms to the dirt. It pressed back, pebble and root and cold. Chin. I lifted it open. I parted my lips. He did not touch me. He let the position do the work. Humiliation burned into heat because it always did when he gave it time. Close. His voice didn't rise, it never needed to. "Say what is true." "I belong to Ronan Veynar." "More?" "In word." "More." "In want." "More." "In bone." His attention weighed as if the air around me had thickened. He stepped closer. Heat rolled over my face. "What do you feel?" "Heat. Pull. You." "More." "Fear." I admitted. "And anger." "At what?" "At you, at me, because I let you take. You didn't let me. You chose me. I hate that it looks the same." "It isn't, it's worse," he said, and he sounded satisfied with the honesty of it. He crouched. His hand hovered over the mark until the skin there ached to meet his palm. He waited. The waiting made the ache louder. "Say the thing you swallow." "No." "Say it." "No." "Look at me." I looked. The creek talked in a low, patient voice. Something moved in the brush and decided not to bother us. "You will name what you want," he said. "I won't." "You will. I won't let you use silence to lie." He let the gap stretch until it felt like a band across my ribs. When I finally opened my mouth, the words came scraped and clean. "I want you." "Good." His palm met the mark. Not hard. Exact. Relief hit with its own kind of pain. My breath hitched, then slowed because his hand told it to. "You hate wanting." "I do." "You will stop." "I don't believe you." "You will," he said, sure as weather. "Because I will show you what wanting is for. For you. For both of us." The word both shook my knees. The earth held. He liked the shift. The small tilt at his mouth said so. "Stand." I stood. Dirt stuck to my palms. He turned to the water and didn't check if I followed. I followed. In. Cold found my ankles, my calves, my knees. I made my mouth behave and turned the shock into breath. Count 10. 1. Again. 1, I said, then found the numbers and laid them in order. By 10, the cold was a rule, not a theft. Out. Mud took my feet. He took my wrists and set my hands on my ribs. Hold yourself up. I'm going to see if you can carry the thing you asked for. I asked for peace. You asked for me, you didn't know how to say it yet. His palm pressed the mark a breath deeper. Heat ran through me like a bright line drawn with a hot iron. He watched the change move down my body, knees finding work, mouth holding its line. Words. I belong to Ronan Veynar in word, in want, in bone. More. I want you. More. I want your hands on me. Where? Everywhere, I said, and the shame and relief met and refused to separate. He didn't reward me. He stepped away. Cold slid into the space he left and made me hear my own breath. Walk. I walked. He circled slow, measuring the line of my spine, the set of my jaw, the way my lungs found their pace without his hand. Stop. I stopped. Kneel. The ground pulled me down with damp insistence. He stood behind me now. Near. Not touching. Hands behind. I crossed my wrists at the small of my back, palms open. The posture raised my chest. He watched my breath show itself. Bear the mark. I loosened the tie and eased fabric off the shoulder. Cool hit hot skin. The bond sang in a steady, dangerous note. Eyes on the water. I fixed on the slow black run, the bright edges around stones. Speak truth for you. I belong to you, I want you. More. I crave you. Pride dragged the word out slow. He heard the price and approved. Ask. No. Ask. He waited. He could wait forever. The creek taught me patience by example. I thought of our door at home, rope no longer under my father's palm, my mother's mouth finally resting, the field line the pack would not cross because his law had teeth. I let go. Please. Please what? Please touch me. Where? The mark. Why? Because it makes everything in me go quiet and right. His breath hit the curve of my shoulder. He didn't bite. He set his teeth near the old scar, a whisper of pressure that lit the whole line of me. A sound escaped my throat that didn't sound like fear at all. He let me hear it. Again. Please, I said lower. Please press. He put his mouth to the mark, lips the edge of teeth, pressure exact as a seal. Heat flashed white. It ran down my back, up my throat into my jaw. I held. He approved with a slow exhale against my skin. More words. I want you, I want your hands, I want your law. Ask for it. Please, make it law. His hand clasped my crossed wrists, not to cage me, to show me I was already choosing stillness. He lifted me with that hold and turned me to face him. My chin came up under 2 fingers. The gold in his eyes went darker at the rims and brighter in the core. The creek hummed behind him. Open. I opened. He didn't take. He watched me hold the posture until shame turned into steadiness. Close. His palm pressed the mark again, deeper, as if his hand could reach whatever mechanism lived under skin and set every part to his rhythm. The bond flared so hard I felt it in my teeth. The shape of it came clear. The loop that would always close. The path with no door back. Listen, he said, you are mine in word, in want, in bone. You begged. You will not pretend you didn't. Say it. I begged. Whose choice? Mine. Whose law? Yours. Good. He released my wrists. My hands stayed where they were for 1 count on their own. When I brought them forward, he caught one and set my palm against his chest. His heart worked hot and steady. Count. 1. Again. 1, I whispered, and it felt like exact work, not a game. Feel how it answers you. This is the seal, there is no door back. The thin thread of fear that had run through my ribs stopped cutting. It wove itself into want, and quieted. My breath came easy. There was room for both. You will not use pride to lie. You will not use fear to hide. You will speak truth when I ask, and use it when I don't. I will. He stepped closer until heat blurred the rest of the world. Mine, he breathed at my ear. Sealed. The word ran through the mark and down my bones like a stamp pressed while wax is warm. The creek kept its low song. An owl called once. Leaves shifted around a small life that knew better than to interrupt. Stand. I stood without help. He watched the way I held the line and nodded once, satisfied it would keep without his hand. Say what you are. I am yours, in word, in want, in bond. Whose peace? Yours. Whose hunger? Yours. Whose yes? Mine. He read what those words had made in me, then touched my jaw once, brief as a mark laid on metal. He turned toward the path. He didn't look back to see if I followed. He didn't need to. I tied the straps. Leather felt wrong for a breath and then right, like a tool sliding into the hand that has finally agreed to its job. I followed along the hush of needles and the black run of creek, the forest opening the same way it had closed because he wanted it to. At the clearing's edge, he paused to listen. The camp breathed in sleep. A fire settled. A body turned on a pallet. Farther out, a wolf moved like smoke tasting the air. Chin, I'm holding it. Good. We crossed into the open. The clearing accepted him the way a scabbard accepts a blade. He lifted the hide. I stepped in first, and the heat of the shelter closed around us. He watched me breathe, waited to see if the new math held. It did. Say it, he asked, not to check, to hear. I begged you, I am yours in word, in want, in bond, there is no door back. He stepped in until the truth met heat and sealed. Good. Sleep. You will need your legs. Will they shake? They will stand. He turned to go. Cool slid in around the hide and left again. Lenora. Yes. Do not waste time being ashamed of a tool that works. I won't. He was gone. Night leaned on the shelter like a heavy hand. I lay down and drew cloth over the mark. Heat pulsed under my palm, steady as a drum set to a pace I had agreed to follow. I counted breaths until the counting wasn't needed. I set the picture of our door at home beside the word I had spoken and found they held each other instead of fighting. Terrified and alive in the same measure, I let both sit. Neither tried to grow bigger. Both obeyed the same law. I closed my eyes and sleep came like a rule kept. The last thing I felt was the thrum of the mark, lining up with a heart that had stopped pretending it wanted any other rhythm. Dawn pressed a pale line along the hides and pulled me up out of sleep. The mark throbbed, not loud, just steady, a weight my body had learned to hold. The camp woke in layers, a cough, the creak of rope, the low scrape of a blade on a stone. Smoke climbed slow and straight. Somewhere a pup yipped and was hushed with a sound that never needed to be sharp. The flap lifted. Heat arrived first, then shadow, then the gold that never asked permission to light a room. He stood there a breath and let the air find his rules again. Up. I rose. My chin found the height he liked. My hands hung easy because I made them. The quiet between us was not empty. It was a room with its own weight. Come. We stepped into the clearing. Morning was young and honest, the kind that makes scars look like they belong. Varka leaned on a rack like a cat who knew exactly when to move and when to be lazy. The broad-shouldered woman had a line of boys stacking wood without wasting their steps. The gray-braided elder stood at the pot with that even gaze that made people straighten before she bothered to speak. Ronan walked to the center and the circle arranged itself without fuss. He didn't raise his voice. He never had to. Here. He sat on the low round of bark that served as a seat and pulled me to settle at his side with a hand that didn't ask. Heat ran through my hip into my stomach and asked a different set of questions. I held my chin and kept my eyes where he had taught me to place them. Look at them. I looked. The pack watched back, not pretending otherwise. Curious, measuring, some hungry to see if I would tremble. A few faces held something like approval, but didn't soften for it. Jokes twitched and died when they reached the corners of mouths that remembered yesterday's math. Jorich stood at the edge where shadow still clung to trunks. His jaw was too tight. His wrist was still wrapped. "Speak," Ronan said. My chest felt small and full at the same time. The words lived there now like tools in a belt. I took them out without fumbling. "I am his." The sound carried. It touched the wood piles and the racks and the edge of the trees where the dark still had a say. The ring shifted with it. No jeers. A low ripple, not mockery. Something closer to a pack deciding it can accept the taste of new law. Inward. Varka's mouth tilted, wrong and pleased. In want. Heat lifted along my throat and sat there like a decision. I didn't look at Jorich. I didn't look at the ground. I looked at the pack and let them have the truth for breakfast. In bond. The gray-braided elder inclined her chin the length of half a breath and let it fall. The broad-shouldered woman wiped her hands on a rag and set it down with care, as if to mark the moment tidy. A boy near the front tried to swallow his grin and failed. A woman with a baby on her hip didn't smile, but her eyes changed the smallest bit, as if they had been convinced of something they would not say in public. Ronan's hand found the mark through cloth and pressed a slow, exact pace into it. It wasn't a show for them. It was a seal for me. He let his eyes travel the ring while he owned the air around my shoulder. "Remember what I told you," he said to all of them and none of them. "She is mine. A hand that touches what is mine without my say will forget how to touch anything for a long time." That wasn't a threat, it was a policy. A hum moved through the camp like a low wind. Jorich didn't move. Pride kept him upright. Caution kept him quiet. The broad-shouldered woman broke the silence with the kind of practicality that makes endings usable. "Eat." Bowls moved from hand to hand, steam rose. People bent to work with their mouths because their legs had done enough for a minute. The pack doesn't waste an hour for the sake of a scene, even when the scene tastes like a story they'll tell later. Ronan lifted a bowl and set it in my hands. He watched me eat with that steady attention that turned simple things into law. He didn't need to feed me. That had been yesterday's mouth. Today he wanted to see what I did with my hands when the truth had weight. Drink. Water tasted like clean stone down my throat. The mark throbbed a yes in time with every swallow. When the bowl was empty, he took it and set it aside without looking. Stand. I stood. He did not. He looked up with that lazy inevitability that always felt like a hand at the back of my neck. Speak the line again. I am his, in word, in want, in bond. He nodded once, not praise, recognition. The ring listened to how I held the last word and made its own peace with it. Jorich's eyes cut sideways, as if he were searching for a different ending and not finding it. His chin dipped the smallest measure, not to me, to the law. It was as much as he could afford. Varka stretched like a lazy blade. Hear that, boys? That's a mouth used right. The tall boy who had learned to keep himself upright grinned without fear of being pulled off the ground for it. A pup yipped once and learned a new kind of quiet when an older wolf cuffed it just hard enough to put sense back in. Ronan rose. He let his hand fall to the small of my back and pushed me one step forward, so I stood alone for the length of 3 breaths. It wasn't punishment. It was a measure. The circle watched how I carried myself without his heat at my side. My knees remembered where they belonged. My chin stayed where he had set it. He stepped back in close, and the measure ended. Work, he told the pack. Run when I want feet. The camp moved like the lesson had been part of a list to check off before noon. Hides, ropes, voices, the practical music of hands. Ronan took me through the ring once more, a slow circle that let eyes touch the truth and stop arguing with it. I could feel the difference from the morning I had first stood there. Curiosity had lost its cruel edge. Testing had turned into keeping. The pack had accepted the cost and the return. We passed the gray-braided elder. She looked at me the way frost looks at a field and decides whether seed can risk itself. Her mouth moved and the smallest sentence in the world slid out. Hold. I dipped my chin a fraction. It was all the thanks the moment could carry. By afternoon, the work sat in neat rows that said we respected winter whether it arrived on time or early. I carried water twice and learned which bucket needed to be held higher, at which angle to keep it from sloshing. A boy showed me where shoes dry fastest without curling. He spoke too quickly, and then slowed himself, proud of knowing something I didn't. I let the pride land where it should. When the sun fell to the height that makes color go honest, Ronan crossed to the center again. He didn't lift his voice. He didn't need to. Listen. The camp obeyed because it liked having a reason to be quiet. She spoke it at my side, he said, almost casual. Now she will carry it to the door. People understood what he meant without needing the words explained. Law is easier to hold when it has more than one post driven into the ground. We walked to the edge of the clearing where the path to the trees begins. He put his palm on the mark and pressed, not to make me yield, to make me remember. Then he lifted his hand and let me step into the first strip of shadow alone. I went, because he had trained my legs to go when truth needed carrying. Who are you? Varka called, lazy and sharp at once. I am his. In what? In word? In what? In want. And in bond. The ring answered with a sound I had not heard from them before. Not the inside the camp hum of approval. Not the wild edge of a hunt cry. Something between and larger than both. A sound that said a thing had moved from story to habit and would live there now. Jorich bowed his head. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't generous. It was the smallest bend needed to avoid breaking. It was enough. The gray-braided elder turned her face slightly and let the brightness of the final light pass over her eyes. The broad-shouldered woman set a last hide just right and wiped her hands as if she had finished a long chore and liked the way it looked on the rack. Ronan let the sound settle. He did not smile. He did not soften. He stepped into me with heat and made the world smaller again because he could. Inside. The shelter took us in and made the air on my skin feel like it had been waiting for this shape. He closed the flap. The dark pressed close without being unkind. He said nothing at first. He stood where he could see the mark through cloth and listened to how I breathed. Speak, he said finally, for me. I came for peace. For your door. For my door. What did you find? You. More. Need, I said, and the word hurt in a clean way. More. Law I want, I admitted. Even when I hate that I want it. Do you hate it now? No. Say it. I want it. Say me. I want you. He stepped close enough that his breath warmed my cheek. He let me hear it and hold still under it. Say the thing with teeth. I need you. He put his hand on the mark, not hard, exact, and the whole of me settled around the weight like a building around a post set true. Cost, he said, voice lower. Say the cost. You, I answered and felt the relief and the fear meet and stop fighting. His mouth tipped that smallest degree that meant something inside him had been satisfied. He didn't reach for soft. He never would. He liked the clean edges of words that could cut and also hold. Say the gift, peace. For whom? For mine. I whispered, picture clear in my head. Porch rope gone, knife sleeping, breath even under a roof with no counting. He leaned until his mouth was at my ear and let the heat speak the final truth into the place. Sound touches first. You are mine. Peace is your gift. I am your cost. And you will never be free of either. The words dropped through me like iron into water and sent rings through parts of me that had nothing to do with pride and everything to do with relief. I closed my eyes because I wanted to feel them land without the world distracting me. Again, he said, because repetition makes law into bone. You are mine, I echoed, and took the first half like a collar I wanted. Peace is my gift. You are my cost. I will never be free of either. He drew back just far enough to see my mouth shape the last line and judge if I believed it. He found what he needed. He put his palm to the mark and pressed one last time, a seal pressed true while the wax still held heat. Whose yes? Mine. Whose hunger? Yours. Whose peace? Yours, I said, and then added the truth that had been growing all day and finally had a mouth. Ours. He did not praise the extra word. He tasted it with a long look and allowed it to live. Sleep. Here? I asked because some small part of me still liked permission even after Law had closed the door. Here, he answered, and the single word put the world back where it belonged. I lay down. He stood over me a breath and then lowered himself beside the furs with that predator stillness that never fully falls asleep. The shelter's heat wrapped the two of us in the shape the night had been trying to teach me. Outside, the camp settled into the low music of belonging. Farther away, a wolf called once toward the ridge and was answered with calm. I put my hand over the mark and felt the steady thrum meet the steady beat in my palm. The two were the same now. There was no door back. The fear that used to gnaw at the seams of sleep came and found no purchase. Want lay down beside it and didn't apologize for its size. Under both, a deep quiet spread that had nothing to do with softness and everything to do with a law that would not betray its own words. Lenora. Yes. Hold. I will. I watched the seam of the hide for a while, the thread, the small flaws, the places where the light found tiny ways through and drew hair-thin lines on the wall. I thought of a porch in the early dark, of hands that could rest, of fields that would wake to dew instead of fear. I thought of a man whose heat made my breath learn a new pace, of a bond that had teeth and mercy in equal measure only because it belonged to him. I did not wish to escape. The thought arrived as quietly as water, and when it touched the rest of me, nothing fought. My mouth shaped it without sound, and then let it dissolve where the mark held heat. Outside, a log shifted and settled. Inside, my lungs kept the rhythm he had set. The last thing I knew before sleep took the room was his presence at my shoulder. Not gentle, not cruel, exactly what it had always promised to be. Peace settled like a weight that made the bed warmer. Cost lay beside it without asking to be smaller. I closed my eyes, and the law held.